it's time for a condensed look at the new Warhammer 3 campaign. Firstly, a few orders of business to take care of. We've got to pick a faction to start with. I was going to go with Nurgle when I initially booted up the game, but by the time I got to this menu, I ended up picking Khorne because the momentum-based, fast-paced style felt like it was going to suit me better. The only thing I knew for sure was that I didn't really want to play as one of the human factions, because humans suck, as we all know from real life, and because they're more similar to other Total War campaigns that have existed in the past. I was about to go for hard for my difficulty level, but then I remembered that I don't like hard. The thing about hard battle difficulty, or anything that's not normal, is that the enemies don't have the stats it says they does, which makes knowing the stats, something I'm quite bad at, already more confusing. Well, we'll go with normal for now. Another technical order of business is that the performance was quite trash. I did see some people on Twitter complaining about this, and I was unfortunately also affected by it. We have to turn the settings quite far down from the recommended ones to get the frame rate up. It was okay for me on high, but still not quite there, so I'm actually playing on medium, and that's why it doesn't look quite as good as it's supposed to, or at least it can do. Another defeat for my stupidly expensive computer, although other people on the internet seem to have the same problems, and maybe there's just something going on with the game's optimization. That might improve one day. Now, as we take our first settlement to the south of where we started, we'll look at one of the gimmicks we have playing as the Khornic Chaos. You have to pay a secondary currency, skulls, to capture territory, and you get that currency partially by killing enemies in battles and also partially by just raising settlements, as we can see at the bottom there. So what we need to do is raise enough settlements to be allowed to buy some territory. You can also do this blood for the blood god thing, but we'll look at that a bit later. The gimmick, though, is that when you have raised territories in your provinces, a province that you partially control already, there's some unknown chance that the territory will just be passed over to you automatically. So in theory, while I raise that settlement, we might just one day have it as a settlement later to put buildings in. Well, we'll just have to leave it for now and find out later. In the meantime, we go off east to attack another place in our starting province. This time, there are some enemies here, so we might have to fight them. Diplomatically, by the way, we're just kind of at war with everyone. We'll talk about diplomacy as it becomes relevant. Right now, we're just fighting some other chaos stuff that's hanging out where we started. Don't even know where we are on the world map. We'll just look at that another time. For now, here's a look at our first real battle. I'm filming the battle replay, as you might note by the way, both covering up my mistakes made in the real-time combat, and it looks a bit better. We can get a view that you don't normally get on the battles. Here I am invading the back of the enemy's town with my cavalry units, of which I have 2. I later discovered they're an Endgame cavalry unit, which explains why they won their battle in about 3 seconds after engaging. Meanwhile, my war dogs here are getting similarly killed by the enemy. I'm not a look at the stats kind of player when it comes to Total War games, because there are too many and too many units to look at, really. So what I like to do is just try things and vaguely remember which units defeat other units, aka the hard way. Here's a nice matchup that in theory, in the stats, would be good. Our anti-armor infantry unit, the Bloodletters, going after an armored enemy unit, the Aspiring Champions. Got distracted there by that fiery thing. I thought it might be a gameplay thing, but I'm pretty sure it isn't, although still don't really know. So we're just attacking this town all over the place, a very uncoordinated assault, the idea being to keep the AI busy. The AI will waste some of its units walking backwards and forwards in the middle, going between the various fights. Here's what ended up happening essentially. Most of the enemy stuff got into this blob with my Bloodletters, our main infantry unit, and we're theoretically killing them. We should be good against the armoured targets at the very least, although the Bloodletters are glass cannon type units with no shield and no armour. They're weak against everything and strong against armoured enemy infantry, so both sides are going to die in this situation pretty much. We're very slowly setting up this rear attack. Unfortunately, they're not the fastest little demons either. In a bit, we'll have our generic Chaos Warriors infantry to use as well, then we won't just be throwing glass cannons around. We also captured the victory point with our cavalry while that was going on. We end up losing one of our units, and that's all that really matters, of course, in Total War, unit losses rather than individual troop losses. But we won the battle, and we have another opportunity to do something to a settlement. This time I'm going to do the other thing. This thing says it's going to spawn me a free army, and I thought that sounds quite interesting. You don't get any skulls when spilling the blood or something for some reason. You'd think you could get both, but unfortunately we only got the blood for the blood god. There's one big downside that I actually didn't expect to doing this, and it's that you have to pay for the new army it spawns. So while it gives you some free units, we're now tanking our economy by having those free units, and those units will eventually disappear on their own as well, so they're not quite free units. What we want to do then is take that army and send it off to die somewhere as soon as possible, so that we don't have it anymore. We could just disband it to save money, but I thought we might as well achieve something with it, and indeed they go to the south and defeat another random chaos settlement. I discovered that with these armies, you can use them to make more of the freely spawned armies, and that's a very powerful seeming discovery. You can have a sort of cascading effect where you keep spamming free armies, which constantly make new free armies every time they reach a settlement. Well, we'll see if we can do something with that. For now, I was trying to see if we could do the old sack and raise trick. Sometimes in Total War, you can do a sack and a raise on the same turn. This is not one of those cases, as it turns out, so they'll have to wait there and raise the settlement another time after sacking it. Here, we have this little ability to spawn some stuff to fight our main army at any time. And the reason you might want to do this is because of that red bar beside our character's portrait on the left. You get debuffed if you don't fight enough battles in a certain amount of time. And every 15 turns or so, you're allowed to spawn a little army to fight to stop that bar from going down. The problem is that's far too few. You need to fight battles every 2 to 3 turns, I think, to keep the bar from going down. So essentially you have to be really aggressive to avoid being debuffed on your armies. And there's that little thing to sort of tide you over, but in this case it not only barely helps, we actually lost a unit in the auto-resolve, which I was outraged by, and there's an enemy Slaneshi army to the south, which is much bigger than ours. So we're going to be sort of stuck in our home province, not fighting battles. Probably the worst possible setup for our faction. A good way to start the campaign, of course. We're going to hide back here and try to get some more stuff. To help in the upcoming clash, we can use this Skull Throne buff that you can buy by spending a ton of skulls. This allows you to summon some units in battles that might allow us to counteract the fact we're about to be outnumbered as we face these Slaneshi troops. They're just raiding on our border. Let's go and kill them right now. We could wait and try to get more units. However, our bar is getting pretty low and you get some serious debuffs if you haven't fought in a really long time. So it's only going to get worse for us. Now check this out here. Contrary to what I said earlier, I actually looked at some of the numbers on this thing that the enemy are spamming, their demonettes, and was delighted to discover that they are the perfect counter to the thing I was starting to spam, the generic Chaos Warriors, in that they are an unarmored anti-armor unit. We're spamming this general purpose tankish armor unit that will be weak against them, and we're outnumbered as well, so that's all good. We get a brief look at what our main battle strategy is going to be with this faction. Run at them. We don't have any ranged units, we just have tons of weak at range melee units. So we might as well just run at them. There's one of those freely spawned units we got through the skull price thing. Elsewhere, here's some more running at them. Here's our faction leader, in fact, storming through the enemy ranks. I did actually use some terrain here to shorten the width of the battlefield to slightly make up for our numerical disadvantage. Some actual strategy happening, but once that initial maneuver strategy is gone, we just have the two sides slap at each other, and some very complex calculations will be going on in the background to decide who wins. Looks like this giant enemy individuals having a fun time dance through our ranks, in slow motion as well. That's because it turns out that in Warhammer 3, any changes you make to the timer in the real battle seem to affect the replays as well. It didn't used to do that. So for whatever reason I put it in slow motion for 2 seconds while playing. Maybe I was trying to take a screenshot or something. Well, if you see that happen, now you know why. Here's the most notable thing about this battle. We actually lost one of our good cav units to the enemy's demonettes, whose armor-piercing damage was able to bring them down, I guess. We now learn that the hard way. We're also going to learn the hard way right after this battle that I can't re-recruit them. I hadn't realized that yet. But as mentioned, they are an endgame unit. We won't be seeing them again for a while. I was actually trying to get them to not be in the melee by the looks of things, but that wasn't happening. After sufficient wailing on each other, it looks like we won, so that's good news. Their giant thing is the final thing to go down, and that's that. We then auto-resolve some survivors who escaped to finish them off. That goes fine, and then the question will be, can we gain anything from this victory? We need to take their settlement for this to be a long-term achievement. So we rush right towards it. They've already started making a new army by the time we get there. I decided to leave them under siege, thinking they might sally because the two sides are quite evenly matched. And they did, and then we get a great auto-resolve and just completely annihilate them. So that's that. This means we have another opportunity to do the skulls or blood choice. We're going to go for the blood choice this time, and I had a particular plan in mind for what I would do with a new army. I knew I'd be able to get rid of it quite quickly, in particular to save cash, because there was another Chaos army standing in the same province that we're at war with, so I thought let's go and quickly kill them. But check this out, you might have noted this earlier. When you hover your mouse over the auto-resolve button, it now flashes on the units that will die if you auto-resolve. That's sort of what we get instead of a balance bar like we used to have. So it's telling me here I'll lose a unit in my main army if I do this, but I don't want to do it manually to try and mainly sacrifice the first stack, because of how much real-life time and effort that takes and how unimportant this moment is to the campaign. Plus, as a general rule, as a very veteran Total War player, auto-resolving is usually the best option because of the way it distributes casualties. Obviously, not quite so much the case in this game, where it does actually just kill off one of my units, but then distributes the casualties among everything else, okay? One day, they'll let me just designate units as sacrifices for the auto-resolve so it mainly kills them. That would have been useful. Now we need to get rid of these units before we run out of money, and there was something vaguely productive I could do. There's an enemy territory to our east. I completely messed up my attack though, doing it in the most stupid way possible. In particular, I split the sacrifice army off from our main army because I thought they might actually win if they fought with the garrison of their settlement. They don't, they get completely annihilated, half killing the garrison, but they'll then slightly regenerate. So what I should have done there is attack with both of my armies at the same time. We would have lost nothing. Instead, I've got two battles where the second battle is only ever so slightly easier because of that first sacrifice. A rubbish sacrifice overall. I didn't put any thought into that, it seems. I was so eager to just throw that army at the enemy and have them die that I didn't realise that keeping them alive might actually have been useful for one more turn so that we had more survivors in our own force. It's quite a lore-appropriate misplay to be making, I think, because this is probably the sort of issue that somebody who's obsessed with death at all costs is going to have as the god of skulls, blood, and whatever we actually are. We aren't playing as Khorne, by the way, which is what I thought I'd originally be doing. We're playing as that guy on the left, Scarbrand, some fellow who wants Khorne to like him for whatever reason. So we're off on a killing frenzy. As you can see though, there is actually some diplomacy to be had. I got a peace treaty with that minor Chaos faction for a simple reason. At this stage I was frustrated that thing I mentioned, where the raised settlements might become normal ones over time, didn't seem to be happening. Quite the opposite, actually, because other factions have colonized 2 of the 3 places I've raised so far. I think Nurgle took the one off to the east of our starting location. So now I'm desperate to run back to the one option left to make a building, because we have no economy. I can't even make a full stack of troops or good troops. So I think I was premature just going around raising everything. I got into this a little bit too hard in the whole skulls for the skull throne vein. We need to actually go back, take the skulls off the throne, and make a solid economy. Let's put some skull roads in to encourage trade or something, because that will allow us to get more skulls in the future. I don't know if the Chaos Demons are really interested in the economics of warfare, but we're going to have to force it upon them so we can win. And just to be extra annoying, what actually happened was that mechanic triggered as I arrived at the place to rebuild. So it does work, it's pure RNG as far as I can tell. There's just some unknown percentage chance per turn that a raised settlement will turn back into a normal one. We've wasted a bunch of time walking back here to do it manually, and then we didn't even do it. So that overall sucks. It's time for this campaign to effectively restart. We're going to try and remake our army, maybe make some buildings, and then actually have a plan. My vague plan was to go up and to the left, because we're on the top left-hand corner of the map. We're near the edge. We might as well capture our little corner here, and then we'll worry about what's happening on the rest of the map. So basically, we need to kill off all of the other Chaos stuff nearby. First, we auto-resolved this monolith place again. That was easy. Had to declare war on the faction though, so we'll have more to come after that. And this time we're not messing around, we're just going to take it. We've got plenty of skulls, and we need lots more territory. Maybe this will all pay out in the long run for Skull fans. We move to the northwest and encounter the army that rebuilt Monolith earlier. Luckily, it's just spammed Chaos Marauders, one of the worst units in the game, so we can just take them down and that's that. We now move on again because they have quite a lot of territory and we want all of it. So first we attack the Folly of Malefics. Not much here, but it's going to kill one of my units if I auto-resolve, and I was kind of annoyed by that because that small enemy army could almost certainly be killed without losing a unit. But I didn't want to actually do it. What I did try though was Lightning Strike. We've now unlocked Lightning Strike, the OP ability. However, it actually makes the auto-resolve worse. I thought maybe it would make it better. Technically, it shouldn't do anything because Lightning Strike is an ability that prevents enemy reinforcements from showing up. In this case, we could somehow take a worse auto-resolve if we used it. Ended up taking the one that cost 1 unit, and again we're just going to spend the skulls and take this region. This means we now have a region in a new province, so in theory if everything else was to become raised, this could be enough for our RNG settlement spreading thing to allow us to expand here. Next I move to the west to attack Chasm of Torment. Again it wants me to lose a unit to do this battle and I was outraged by that, so I decided to try some shenanigans here. I thought, what if I combine these two units together? Therefore, we now have only one weak unit in the army, and indeed that is the one it wants to delete. So we can minimize our long-term casualties by doing it this way. The unit that had the stuff merged into it will have less to replenish with that arrangement, but otherwise the result is the same. So that's a good little trick to use, I suppose, and there's a bigger version of that trick we'll see coming later actually. I took the opportunity to spawn a new army to take it to the northeast and finish off this province. However, a massive Slaneshi army is coming right through this pass, and that could be a problem. Turned out though, they nearly wanted peace with me, the main Slanesh faction. So I gave them essentially all of my money and joined a random war to get out of this war. The money situation was actually bad. We are now bankrupt and will suffer attrition. That will usually mean you lose 10% of your army every turn or something like that. What we can do in this situation is sell a non-aggression pact to a Beastman faction that happened to be hanging out near our home territory. They were willing to pay a lot for that, the most I could ask for. And there you go, now we have some money to work with. We go on to attack this final settlement in this province and it all goes fine thanks to our sacrificial army upping our strength. Once again I'm going to pay the skull price and take this region. So there we go, we've sort of expended our supply of skulls there, we can't do that anymore, but now we definitely have some territory. I'm immediately looking back west to that Chasm of Torment, because the Slaneshi army that I just got peace with walked in that direction, and indeed, they just rebuilt that place. I was so annoyed by this, I immediately declared war on them. That's breaking the peace treaty I just got, so we now have terrible diplomatic relations with everyone for breaking a peace treaty, that's all good. But we do get this place back. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to actually rebuild it, so we'll have to see what we can get with the RNG, but now we're going to walk beyond it to carry on against Slanesh and make sure they can't rebuild it, although somebody else could do it any time. Next up, there was a fortress that's blocking our progress. The problem we have here is it's guarded by that full stack, and then we'll have its garrison and we'll have towers and the like. So I really didn't want to attack. Instead, I spent quite a long time actually trying to set up ambushes, and our demons are getting very annoyed by that. We're now debuffed because we're not fighting enough. Well, I couldn't see a way to get a good fight, so I ended up trying stuff here for about 4 or 5 turns, and finally we got a situation where the enemy army came out of the fort in forced march stance as well, which is handy, so we'll get the chance to engage them in a field battle. Although just before that happens, we get this cutscene. There's something going on. Some rifts to the Chaos Realm are opening. The Chaos Realm is just another part of the map effectively to our north as far as I can tell. So we have the opportunity to go there, which you normally don't have because it's not connected to the rest of the map. We though are not going to do that, so I won't commentate on anything to do with that until I actually paid attention to it in the campaign. So we ignore that. We go on to attack the Slaneshi army. Luckily, we just destroy them with an auto-resolve, which gives us nice, even casualties. Perfect. We then go on to attack their settlement, but this time we can't just take it because it's going to kill half of my army with this auto-resolve. There is something I discovered later that we could have done in this situation to make this easier for ourselves, but I'll mention that later on, I suppose. For now, I actually had to do this battle, and here you can see our commander is very angry about the prospect, or perhaps is angry about the fact he's getting shot by towers and I'm not giving him any orders by the looks of things, or he might be angry that the main way I wanted to go into this settlement was guarded by most of their stuff, so we're going to have to go and attack in a different direction. On the other side of the settlement, I had this theoretically good attack where my bloodletters go after some demons and they'll easily get access to the town. But the enemy is performing really well because they just run away from me, and they're going to do that for the entire battle. They constantly ran without fighting. In the meantime, the towers are absolutely annihilating me, so they're effectively kiting me around the settlement, not allowing me to engage them, and the towers are chipping away at my troops. And we actually lost a lot to the towers, more than we lost to the actual fighting in this battle, I seem to recall. So great tactics from the AI. My other strategy was to have our main man just bust through these powerful units to get all of the bloodletters into the settlement, and then we'll just have a general brawl and hopefully things will go fine. So here is that general brawl a bit later going on. This is the part of the fight where the enemy weren't just running away from us and the two sides just go for it. Here's our motorbike thing having a fun time amongst the enemy. It's a really cool looking unit, but it's actually kind of low tier and not very good. But then again, it's a cool looking unit, so we better just have it for that reason anyway. Here's an annoying fight against their Chaos Spawn style units, those things that can never rout, so it's just a long and grinding fight. We won it eventually. We also took tons of capture points, but along the way got shot to pieces by the towers walking around inside the town, as mentioned. We ended up losing 2 full units, I think, instead of the 4 or 5 the auto-resolve was going to give us, so I suppose it was worth it in the end, and that was that. We captured the place because we actually got enough skulls to do so. This also completes one of the first missions you get, to own a united province. We finally have it, not our own home province. We need to move on right away though, because with our war against Slaanesh, we can go into the next province and start taking that, which I wanted to do anyway, so that's useful. We arrive at the next settlement up the road, and it's another case where I'm going to lose half my army if I auto-resolve this, even though it doesn't look too hard. I was annoyed by this, but I sort of need to fight them this turn to keep my bloodletting up. That thing goes down really fast. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 turns, sometimes I've noticed you only get 1 turn before you have to fight again to stop it going down a level. In this case, I just took the hit. I tried to siege them out thinking they might sally, which would also give us the battle we wanted for the bloodletting. Because that didn't happen, in the next turn I tried this. I did some merging so that I only had 2 weak units. And indeed, now the auto-resolve will only kill those 2 units instead of the 4 or 5 it wanted to before, and those 2 units barely had any troops in them. So with a little bit of army management here, if you make sure you have a weak unit that will act as a sacrifice, if the auto-resolve just wants to kill 1 unit's worth of stuff and doesn't really mind how many troops are in that unit, you can play some games here and get much better results out of the new auto-resolve system, it seems. Now I really needed some cash, so I decided to sack this place. Then I'll just have to attack it again next turn to finish it off, and then we'll move on after that. I needed the cash to do various economic upgrades back at home, which I'm not really talking about too much in this campaign, but they're going to be happening in the background. Now we annoyingly get a war declaration from Nurgle, one of our Chaos friends/rivals. They're at the east end of our territory for the most part, aka the end where our military forces are not. So that's a particularly inconvenient declaration. All we can really do is try to finish off this Slaaneshi business off to the west and then go back later and just hope we don't lose too much in the meantime. We take down the capital of this final province at the end of our arm of territory. Going to pop a blood for the blood god so we get some more troops to use to attack the last part of this province over here to the east, and from there there's a road that vaguely goes back towards Nurgle's territory. In the meantime, here's a minor battle, an auto-resolve against one of these factions that just sort of spawns and walks around the map in Warhammer, the Pleasure Tide. I mention this only because it's going to become a bit more relevant in a second, so some sort of auto-resolve happened there. Now back to the next main fight, well, also an auto-resolve. We attack the next Slaaneshi town, not much there, we take it down with the help of our new blood stack. This time we'll turn it into skulls, and now because we have one place in this backwater province and there's nobody else really to build stuff up here, eventually that corner of the map will become ours if we just leave it and we can walk off for now. Might make us some money in the future. Now, while I was walking to the southeast to rejoin the fight against Nurgle, this thing happened again, only this time I wasn't able to dismiss it with an auto-resolve for whatever reason. So we're going to be under siege there, and my response to this was to start trying to make a new army effectively. We can't really afford it, and if you don't have a full stack in your first army, it's inefficient to start a second army because of how the game's economy works. I ended up trying to send in one guy to see if that would tilt the balance, but by the time he arrives, we've taken attrition, so the situation is actually worse. Now I need to try and recruit faster than I'm losing troops to attrition in the siege if we want to turn that around. Well, I started trying to do that. The money isn't really there though. We'll come back to that in a sec. Meanwhile, our main stack arrives at a bit of Nurgle's territory that's actually right next to our home province. It's just in a disconnected area because of how the mountains work, so we're nearly home at the moment, but still very far away movement cost wise. Once we arrive, we easily win a battle and then pop up another Blood for the Blood God army. We can use that to take down the province capital, which is also nearby. In the meantime, by the way, we're being attacked all over the place. We've got that Pleasure Tide siege. There are some Norscan troops from the south who sailed over and have started a siege at one of the other places in that area. There's a message there saying we're about to be attacked by some demons or something. Don't know what's going on with that. We've got Nurgle forces attacking our home province and some Slaneshi forces hanging out near our capital. So it's all going, but no actual battles are happening so far. So I'm contenting myself to just do this stuff in this disconnected area with my troops. We're going after this provincial capital. We take it with no units lost, and this is a perfect place to use our skulls to actually take the place rather than raise it, because now we have the best part of this province, the best region in the province, and we can destroy the rest freely and maybe we'll get it later. In the meantime though, back to the Pleasure Tide thing, I've managed to recruit 4 units, but again, by the time I've done that, we've lost half the garrison, so we're still not gaining an advantage over the enemy. I decided I was going to have to do what I could have done in the very beginning, and that is manually resolve the fight, stoop to a manual resolve like a common prole. We get a similar arrangement to the field battle we saw earlier. In fact, it's on the same map as the one we saw earlier, and it's the same factions with pretty much the same units. So this is just happening again, and both sides only have one available strategy: run at each other. So we just start slapping and see what happens here. We do have some of our Chaos Warriors which are going to be weak against the enemy's demons. There's our commander slashing out into the enemy front lines. He then died very quickly, but the idea was there, and Khorne doesn't care whose skulls he collects in the end. The ultimate result of this battle was 2 different blob fights. The blob on the right was one where we were losing, and the blob on the left was one where we were winning. So the question is, can we win the left blob enough to defeat the survivors of the right blob? Turned out that we did, and I suppose that's the end of that. And the really good news is that most of the units that died were strategically from the garrison. I tended to save my real units for doing outflanking maneuvers. So while we lost tons of stuff, it was all the free stuff that doesn't count. Our actual army is kind of still alive. They go on to finish off the enemy survivors, killing yet more of our own garrison. And that's that. Now we have this pile of troops to use potentially over here. I wanted to do something about the Norscan invasion. The issue is it's too big really to charge in and try to fight them. Well, we'll come back to that. In the meantime, we've got another battle, because Nurgle and Slanesh are teaming up against us here at the Brass Glacier. Finally, a battle in our invaded home region. It's just an easy defeat for us, but I thought actually I will stoop again to manually resolve, because the enemy have quite a lot of weak-looking smallish units, and I thought if we can manually resolve this in such a way that we actually get some full unit kills, this might not be a pointless last stand. It also gives us a chance to look at the changes made to siege defense. I sensed something was going on because the AI seemed to be doing something. Looks like you now have a currency that gradually goes up over time at the top of the screen there, and you use that to make your towers and barricades. They're not just there automatically, or you don't get them for free as you used to. So it's a bit more like a tower defense game, albeit with realistically 1 tower because of how expensive they are. I think in this battle I got 2 eventually, because you have to wait for the currency to build up and then they take more time to appear on the map after you buy them. Eventually, we get 1 tower shooting into this blob of enemies, and I paid for the more expensive tower with area of effect damage, hoping to grab more kills. As for our general strategy, we can block the enemy at a couple of entrances, but you can see they're walking in relatively unblocked elsewhere, so we're certainly going to lose in one way or another. But the good news is that we actually did get a bunch of kills, and more than I expected. One of the main blobs was defeated, perhaps with help from that cannon tower. So we knocked out a whole bunch of units, and because their units are demon type, once you've nearly killed them, the rest just die off, so the units don't survive. And ultimately, it ends up with this result where we've actually killed much more than I expected of the Nurgle army, and even a little bit of the Slaanesh army that came in at the end to overwhelm us. So that's going to be useful. It's going to make it easier for us to take that area back, or make the enemy have to wait longer before they attack again. The Norscan troops that were attacking us basically kill themselves, which is really useful. They make an attack against a settlement that they somehow can't win, and we just wipe them entirely out, so that's that sorted, easier than expected. Meanwhile, our main force is making progress towards the front line. We first took down a minor faction that was in the way with just one region. So now we are one region away from being back in our own home territory, actually. We're coming around the mountains that divided us previously. We finished off the rest of the Norscans, using that general I had just to get a bit more experience on him. And that's that invasion over. This minor army will now come to help out with the situation at home after a while. Here's something that happened a load of times. I'll just mention it happening one time and you can imagine it the rest of the times. There were constant rebellions up in this territory we took earlier towards the top of the map, and they just all lost constantly, but it provided us with a nice income stream because every time you kill a rebel army, you get a bunch of loot. So we're going to have some free money coming in from that. Meanwhile, here we are now taking the place that's right next to our capital, finally going to have a chance to unify our home province by kicking out the now 2 Nurgle settlements. As for this first one, there's not much here. However, we are going to lose a unit if I make an attack, and the unit's in the main army, so it's time to once again play the game. We just say, well, what if that unit that died had less stuff in it? And you get the same result, but with fewer casualties, technically. Losing a unit is the same in the long run either way, but in the short run, this is marginally better. So that's the new exploits to keep in mind. We go on to easily retake the other place for the simple reason that the Nurgle armies were kind of hiding in the mountains. They walked off the roads and were just hanging out in the area. So they didn't defend, and that was that. We still have to hunt them down though. Unfortunately, as my smaller army came back, it actually got attacked in this really disadvantageous battle. I was frustrated by this because all of my 3 armies were standing right next to each other, so they should have all fought as one. But at some point in the recent Total Wars, I seem to remember, the AI figured out that you can do the old siege reinforcement block trick. They just had a couple of units besiege my main army, so it couldn't take part in any fights that turn. Then they killed off all of my smaller armies with their bigger army. Some player-style exploits right there. Good stuff. Well, we'll start getting our revenge pretty fast. We take out the smaller army by sallying out. Now we need to go after the bigger one. They retreat so we don't get support from the garrison, but we'll just go after them anyway. The auto-resolve casualty proposal is not to my satisfaction. Basically, the entire army will die if we take this. So I'm just going to do the trick again. I'll stop commentating on the trick now. Basically, if my army suddenly changes in size between shots, I was probably doing some kind of trickery like this. So I got rid of a bunch of units to take fewer casualties. This isn't really any better in the long run because we don't have to fight soon, so getting easier replenishment on the units that survived doesn't matter. Basically, either way, we have to re-recruit the units. This way, we're a bit stronger while re-recruiting, if that makes any sense. And I think you also take fewer total casualties in the battle if you do a better auto-resolve that loses fewer units, although that's just my anecdotal experience. So what are we going to do now? We're still at war with Nurgle and Slaanesh, and they're vaguely on the right side of the screen here. The red highlighted area on the left is us, so basically we need to go to the right for our main military expansion options. There's this minor faction in the way we might consider killing as well, but several things happened that delayed me from doing any of that. First, we had a minor invasion coming up from Kislev in the south. Pretty cheeky of them to come up here. Luckily, they didn't bring very much stuff. It says I can just auto-resolve them with no units lost at first, but then I made a mistake. I saved the game and reloaded it because I went to do something else, I suppose. That was a big mistake. And for some reason, when I come back, now it's a Pyrrhic victory with 2 units lost. So the hints there of some kind of save load exploit to change auto-resolves, in this case not in our favour. Maybe there's a bigger exploit to be found there. For now, I had to do this manually, and basically we're going to absolutely annihilate them because the auto-resolve there is lying. At least as a consolation prize, we get to look at their interesting bear units. They had a couple of bear sleds riding around. Since the enemy mostly had ranged units, or units that have a ranged secondary weapon, running at them becomes an even more important strategy, not that we weren't going to do that anyway. So we lock down all of their ranged stuff, and their cavalry as well, and their chariots. So no shenanigans available from the enemy, all they can do is just fight in melee. The side with the numbers wins. It devolves into another 2-blob engagement. We win one of the blobs quickly, allowing us to win the other blob a bit later. We essentially just stomped everything. The enemy had tons of guns and stuff, but they're not going to be able to use them to pierce our armor or anything like that, because we're just all up in their grills, etc. There's their commander dying. We ended up losing basically nothing in that battle. We completely stomped them. The auto-resolve is shamed by this performance, and I didn't even do anything special. We just ran at them, and it did the business. So there you go, that's that Kislev invasion dead. There was a bit more coming, but I just ignored them in the end. Now I geared up to get a full stack, ready to push east, but while I was looking at the minor faction I wanted to take over there, I remembered the quest battle down here. We've had that quest for a while, but there's no point doing a quest battle until you have a 20-unit army, so now for the first time we actually have that. It's pretty much the earliest time we can do this battle anyway, so I remembered it at an opportune moment. To start with, it tells you to kill these 2 small Khorne armies that are at the tops of these ramps, and you can just send everything up one ramp to theoretically fight them one at a time. Doesn't really work like that, and I think this was the wrong decision, because sending my whole army up this small space leads to this. The enemy have these single model units like this giant bike, and once they're in your blob, the blob is effectively immobile because all the troops get mixed together, and whenever someone from a unit touches one of the enemy's single models, it cancels their orders. So you saw it happening there. I'm trying to get the blob to not be a blob, but it just can't be done. All orders are cancelled pretty much straight away. So basically our infantry aren't going to do anything in this battle. They're just mostly standing here with a few of them fighting with these small enemy units, while our big guy tries to take down the enemy big guys. One of our heroes escaped the blob and died, so that's not very useful. And then I saw this thing, the Soul Grinder. This is a tier 5 endgame unit we can get that looks really good. I probably will try and get this. It's basically something from the Doom franchise, a combination demon robot spider thing with a flaming sword, the sort of thing that should go down well. It's not a good day to be in our blob. We're taking so many area of effect attacks from enemy officers, their heroes, and their just special monster units, and our main man will gradually kill them because he is better, but we're taking huge casualties along the way, also getting rear attacked a little bit by those minotaurs, and soon the rear attack intensifies as another army joins the field. We also have to fight this Nurgle force. They're just going to pile into our blob, and it will be a blob-on-blob fight, but with more big stuff causing disruption and all of these giant bee-wasp things that are generally nightmarish. It's just not going very well. And again, most of our soldiers won't be fighting most of the time, so our DPS will be abysmal right there. Things eventually work out at the end of this story. We just stand there in the blob fighting for ages. Our commander gradually takes out the enemy's main heroes and commanders without really taking much damage himself because he's just so powerful. And then that's that. Eventually our blob is bigger than the remaining enemy blob. So we do win, just with heavy casualties. We lost a hero there and a unit of dogs, but it could have been much worse. We have a fair few units getting away just with heavy damage, and that's okay. I did strategically have guys sit on the sidelines of the battle to not take any more damage to try and get a better result. So I did some tactics there aside from just fighting in a huge blob. The quest is done, and what this actually does is give our main guy this superior weapon where it gets more powerful the more kills he gets. So if we send our legendary lord in to fight some massed infantry, he'll become more powerful and can then kill enemy officers and hero characters more effectively later. So that's the plan for that, and it's all out of the way basically. And now for the next and biggest distraction from our main strategy goals. The gates to the Chaos Realm opened again. They were open earlier, as I might have mentioned. Essentially, you can walk through these little tentacly things to enter the Chaos Realm, the part of the map we can't normally get to. You have to go to one of the 4 locations, and I think the objective of the game is to visit each one, and there's a quest battle at each location. Here's a little flyby of the Chaos Realm. It looks like it's another dimension, but for convenience and programming purposes, I suppose, it's just part of our map, but off to the north. Still, wherever it is, our main army will now not be in our territory, so our territory is completely empty while we're trapped here doing this quest. So that's useful. Maybe something bad will happen because of that. I'm in the Cinch Chaos Realm part in particular. Essentially, we're in this set of rings, and as you walk towards these purplish gates, it moves you closer to the middle, and you just have to do that a number of times to get to the middle, and then there'll be a quest battle. Along the way, we got attacked by loads of stacks, but I just auto-resolved them, so there was footage of that happening once. I'll skip the rest. At home, we actually have enough money to make a new army, so we're not going to be completely defenseless as it turns out. It takes ages and it's super expensive to make a new army, but that will be stewing in the background along with lots of economic upgrades and defensive upgrades. One thing I enjoyed along the way is that each gateway gives you the chance to actually leave the Chaos Realm with a reward. So this is like the temptation to not complete the quest. You can just get absolutely tons of money and enormous buffs, like plus 100% casualty replenishment, which would make you basically invincible back on the campaign map for some amount of time. But we are going to resist all temptation and try to find out what's actually going on here. There was a minor distraction back somewhere to the west when one of these spawning demon armies annoyed me by not being auto-resolvable, so I went in and killed them easily. Just pointing this out once again that I am better than the auto-resolve. Well, how about that, and a claim for any Total War player. Now, for the main action, we've made it to the center of Slanesh's realm. Turns out there's not much here. I thought there'd be a quest battle, and there sort of is, but not really. So this is a normal battle, because you're allowed to auto-resolve it essentially, and the auto-resolve will be a heroic victory because a second army has appeared to help us out. I thought the game was being nice because you're supposed to be really beaten up by this point, but because we have the faction trait that we always replenish in enemy territory, we're actually at full strength by the end of the trial. Well, it turns out there was something else going on here. Tons of other enemy armies are dead in the auto-resolve result, and they weren't there before. So I'm guessing it's kind of like a quest battle. If you actually fought the battle manually, it would then make you do all those other fights one after the other, and you'd have to get through them all. Well, looks like we saved ourselves a bunch of time by auto-resolving them into a heroic victory. It all went fine, and that's that. We've now done one of the 4 things, and it actually plays a cutscene here, suddenly bringing up the chaos lore of where chaos comes from very late into the series, because it's going to introduce a villain or something. We've got this ancient chaos demon who's gradually coming back to life, and he's hanging out in a place called the Great Forge or something, which is also where there's a god of a bear you might have seen mentioned here and there. We're trying to get to this forge, and to get there we have to collect the 4 things, of which we now have 1. So we'll go to the Chaos Realm some more later and the plot may return. We've got this Taint of Slanesh thing from being in the Chaos Realm. We get a pretty large debuff to control, which is public order, and our leadership, which is our main guy's morale. That doesn't matter so much. To get rid of it, you have to go and sit in a provincial capital, so I sent my army to go and do that to see if I could get rid of it. Here's another experiment. I thought I'll go and close this portal that was annoying me earlier, since I've now discovered you can just walk into these things and click Close Rift. But then we discover that trying to close the rift also forces you to fight a small battle. Pretty easy to kill, but I've sent basically nothing to do it. That means we're going to die, because you're not allowed to back down from doing this either. So another lesson learnt the hard way. Now our secondary army is ready to go, and it's finally going to achieve something. I moved it to the east, hoping to attack Nurgle, and indeed there was an unguarded settlement over here. We just take them down, and I'm going to blow the place up. I think I probably should have just taken it, but my vague goal was to raise a settlement and then run away, just to be annoying and avoid any counterattacks because I had no faith in this army. I was kind of waiting for the main army to become available again. But the main army gets distracted doing this. Here's an example shot of what I did for many turns. There was a Cinch army in my territory, and I just chased them for ages. A classic, annoying Total War situation. They can run away and you just never engage them. So that happened for a while. Then Nurgle offered me a peace treaty with a bit of money as well, and I thought, okay, I'll take that peace treaty because that simplifies matters. There's plenty of other stuff for us to take right next to us, actually. This other faction has been gradually taking over ruined settlements. So I thought, let's attack them right now with our secondary army. Although, they are allied to Nurgle, so it's not so easy. Or is it? I went to this faction I'm trying to kill, gave them a bit of money to break their alliance to Nurgle. They naively accepted that deal for basically no money as well. and then I immediately say, okay, now that you don't have any allies, we're at war. Absolutely bamboozled. Seems even the chaotic demons of Khorne have a few diplomacy tricks up their sleeve. Annoyingly, this is another army I'm going to be chasing around for a while, so we'll just skip over that. After our main chase comes to an unfruitful conclusion, I just stopped chasing the Sinch army. I decided to go after the minor faction to our southeast, the one I was going to attack ages ago, and here we are taking the first of their territories, setting up a base. Now we are free to raise the other ones if we want, but the one to the north I think I went and took in the next couple of turns, gonna skip over that. The bigger news about what's going on is starting right here. I noticed this Kislev invasion fleet approaching these docks. I'm going to throw a lord in there to help defend. We've already got the upgraded defense buildings, so we're ready to stop them. But this is going to become an ongoing theme, as we'll soon see. My second army now achieves something else, taking down a settlement from one of these people we just bamboozled. Then the Kislev army does attack where I thought they were going to attack, and we just immediately kill them. So that's all good, but this is just the beginning. Kislev are actually a gigantic faction at this stage. They control a lot of the map when I last looked, and we'll see more of that in a second. I actually finally caught up to the Sinch army when it happened to walk back closer to me. It was close to another Khorne army that it could be reinforced by, but thanks to good old lightning strike we skipped the reinforcements and just killed the smaller enemy army, so we finally got rid of those guys. As for the smaller army, I didn't want to engage them right now because I was afraid of taking losses, and that's a concern because not only do we have to attack a walled settlement after this, there are 2 more stacks of Kislev troops right there, and a third one there might be ready to join the party as well. Essentially, Kislev are all over the place directly to our south. We can't see much of them at the moment, but they've decided to start coming in our direction and they have a lot more stuff than we do. So I'm going to be a bit careful here. I decided to try an ambush, didn't have the best chances. It actually failed and we ended up fighting the little Khorne army. This wouldn't be so bad, it's just that the auto-resolve was absolutely abysmal. It was telling me it was going to kill my entire army if I auto-resolved this, maybe because they have a weird army composition that's messing with the auto-resolve. I was pretty outraged by this. I actually cancelled this interception chance and then fought them in the next turn. Here is a very brief look at the field battle of me fighting that tiny army. What did we do? Well, we ran at them, and I ran at them with my anti-cav units in the front to be extra effective, so there's a little bit of strategy, and it worked out fine. We annihilated them. That auto-resolve is put to shame once again. I then moved on to attack that big walled settlement. I actually brought over some reinforcements I've been recruiting as well, just to help. And again, we can just take it for free right now. Although we are taking some casualties here, need to keep in mind that Kislev might attack this army before it finishes replenishing. We need 3 or 4 turns at this stage to be at full strength. At first, I was going to sack this place and then run back to one of our previously captured places to heal. But after doing the sacking, I pretty much immediately regretted it. I was like, well, I could just heal right here if I was occupying the place, and it's got walls, it's a powerful place to defend if Kislev come at us. So we go right back in and also pay the skull price to take the place over. Looks like the economics of that works out pretty well, actually. In some Total War games, when you sack a place, you get so little money that it's not worth it if you want to also take it. Here, the cost of repairing the sack damage was way less than we got from doing the sacking, I think anyway. So, we're now super rich, and we control this province, and we're getting loads of replenishment. We do get hit by Kislev. On the way back, I tried to move my small army to go back west to defend somewhere else, but they were in forced march stance and got attacked. So there's not much we can do about that other than die, which is a little bit useful because it weakens the enemy a tiny bit as well. I'm going to do this unholy manifestation, which boosts the campaign movement range of our second army back home by 50%, allowing me to run off east and attack this now unguarded enemy settlement. I'd essentially been waiting for it to be unguarded for a while. You can see those armies to the north have walked off out of the way. So we storm on in, and we have the skulls to immediately take over and start rebuilding here immediately, and we'll slap down the defensive buildings as well. We use Scarbrand to take out the Kislev army. They just killed our smaller army easy enough. And then the other Kislev army nearby to the west just walked off in its turn. There is another one in the sea as well that was there. I was concerned that we're almost certainly going to be attacked here again in the very near future. However, the gates to the Chaos Realm have also opened up, so I thought, well, I should probably go and do this. I'm under the impression that there's some sort of race or time limit aspect to this. You want to get in and do these as soon as possible. So I just jumped on in, left our defenses open, and we're now in the Khorne realm. Here you just have to kill a bunch of these smaller, weaker armies, and once you've killed enough, it will unlock the final battle to get the thing, the soul we're trying to steal from this area. You can also take some weapons from these white glowing things, although I think the weapons are kind of temporary, like eventually the weapons you take from Khorne's realm will disappear. Something like that's going on, but there's some decent weapons for your officers. We don't really have enough officers to need any more weapons at the moment, though. Then back on the Kislev front, we lose another small army. I tried to rebuild my little backup army here, and while moving it around, the exact same thing happened. It got attacked by someone I wasn't paying attention to, and gets wiped out. Although in their death, they actually killed tons of this enemy army, and that's great, because they can't replenish here either, so that's going to limit their ability to fight us. Here's a little battle happening up the top end of our territory, as my secondary force danced around for a bit and eventually took one more of the enemy's territories up there. Not really talking about that little campaign because not much is happening. Generally I was just waiting for the enemy to get out the way so I could steal their stuff. Here we are, killing the final Khorne army in the Chaos Realm. Another case where it looks like an easy battle. You get the auto-resolve for the easy battle, but it was actually hard or something in the end. I can't quite tell. Well, pressing the win button seems to work particularly well. We might actually be getting a better result than a manual resolve there. Once we're out of the Chaos Realm, we can return to the Kislev defense situation, which as you can see is getting a bit out of control. They have multiple armies now besieging us. I was trying to make another backup army here. But with the return of Skarbrand, we can resolve this right now, because he can use Lightning Strike to kill only the smaller portion of this force. So that's going to weaken them a fair bit, and then our two armies can team up on the enemy's remaining one, plus our garrison. We end up chasing them to a point where we can't use the garrison, and after some shenanigans to avoid some losses in this battle, we take them down as well. After that, I wanted to put Skarbrand back in the settlement, because once again he's got the Chaos Taint. I think this time it gives you a big public order debuff, and there's this 50% chance you'll lose it every time you spend a turn garrisoned in a provincial capital or something to that effect, plus he needs to recruit a bit. Although in the end I think he didn't actually get rid of it before I thought of something else to do with him, so we're just going to tolerate it for now. Meanwhile, the second army is once again making progress against some random guys up at the top, taking the opportunity to create a blood god stack thing, a blood spawn army, to go after more stuff in the area. There's an enemy army there from someone or other, and a settlement to the south to hit. On the way there was that rift, and I actually stopped to close the rift and take down the small army here. Not really for any strategic purpose, just because there was a quest to close at least one rift at some point. So we've now done that and got an absolutely tiny amount of money, great. And we can then send these two stacks on to attack that other place. And I quite like having the blood spawn stack, because you can just absolutely sacrifice them. They don't matter at all, even less so than regular armies do. And we just storm the enemy and we can just get rid of the troops once we're bored of them, essentially. There was then a minor battle somewhere far away, because while we get attacked by random stacks of demons spawning all over the place, we usually auto-resolve them. Here was one case where I couldn't auto-resolve, but we're going to once again highlight this just to prove that I can do it manually and we don't even have to do anything special. Well, first of all, I'm just going to stand here. Normally you want to countercharge, but sometimes in Total War it's actually stronger to stand still versus running at the enemy. Can't quite tell, and I don't know if this is one of those games, but we let the enemy charge into us for a bit. They actually only attacked with a few of their units, which was kind, so we could fight them. And then eventually the two lines just collide. You might note we're on the map, the classic map. And the blobs will fight. As it happens, our blobs are going to defeat their blobs. Once the enemy's morale is low, they also disappear because they're magical beings, which makes things very fast towards the end. And that's that. We absolutely annihilated them. Again, just casting that shade on the auto-resolve. I'm just bitter because I feel like doing battles like that are a waste of my valuable time, and I wish it would just let me skip them, like it normally does, to be fair. Now here I am, trying to get that Nurgle faction we were at war with earlier to not have any allies, and once again they accept this deal for a tiny amount of money, so now they're diplomatically isolated all of a sudden. Well, it just so happens I was standing outside their final settlement with most of my troops, so it looks like they've made another diplomatic mistake. And if you look above Skarbrand's head, there's that black and red symbol thing, meaning he's still corrupted by chaos, so I guess I didn't get rid of that thing from earlier. Not that it matters too much while we're in enemy territory to be reducing public order. I could have used this Bloodspawn stack here to actually help with the fight I'm about to do, but I was so eager to get rid of them I just fired them rather than getting them killed in this battle. Not quite sure why I did that. Well, here we go, doing the auto-resolve. Bang, this faction's pretty much dead now, and that was easy enough. Annoyingly, this region is part of a province that extends off in a weird direction to the southeast, so it's going to be an annoying place to manage. They had another army somewhere up the top end of our territory, but our secondary army, now led by this giant demon thing who appears to replace the commander thanks to Khorne, is killed, and that's their faction officially dead. I was immediately looking at the next towns over thinking, shall we just go straight for them? But we'll see in a second. I actually turned back after walking in that direction for a certain reason. My next target was to the southeast of Skarbrand's position. There's another one region faction. I thought I'll just storm in and take them down immediately, no questions asked. The problem was they were allied to somebody, but once again we just paid them some tiny amount of money to make them stop. Not sure why that's so effective in this campaign. Maybe that's a glitch or a balancing error. Anyway, once I advanced a tiny bit, I discovered they had way more troops than I thought they did upon first inspecting them. So that gave me cause for pause. Meanwhile, the second army, as mentioned, goes back from the front line to deal with a really big and powerful rebellion that showed up, so I needed an actual army to go and fight them for me. Here you can see the enemy are defending their territory really well. They've got a big garrison and 1.5 stacks. Probably can't just storm in there and kill them. But after a while, after biding my time, the situation I was looking for happens. Their main stack decides to go on the offensive, moving north in forced march stance. That means they can't come back and attack in one turn. This gives us leeway. We can take their settlement, and we'll have at least one turn to rebuild and replenish the army before they attack, and maybe 2. So we storm in and take the place. We've got the skulls ready, and that's that. Now they're going to be in trouble, and their stack will be taking attrition because they no longer have any territory. As it happens, we didn't even need to be so strategic, because this army just stood there for like 3 turns after this and did nothing, so that was fine. Meanwhile, if you were wondering what happened to the other small army that was following Skarbrand, well, it's got a bit bigger, and I actually sent it over to Kislev's territory. I wanted to do some kind of counter-offensive / defensive offensive to just be in their territory and be annoying, so that's going to be my next fun project. And here we are just finishing off that Siege army. My main army and secondary army came together in the middle of the map to attack them from both sides. They were stuck besieging a settlement they couldn't take, and we wiped the floor with them. My cheeky raid into Kislev didn't exactly go to plan. What I thought I'd do is take this provincial capital right here. But the first signs this isn't going to work were already here, when I took it really easily. Basically, I thought this place would be a walled settlement, easy to defend, and I would just somehow take it once I arrived. I actually took it pretty easily. That's because it's not a walled settlement. It seems the rule where a provincial capital always comes with walls isn't necessarily true. So we started building defences there, but long before anything could be set in place, an army showed up to attack, and it's just going to be a normal settlement defence, defending the ruins of something. Effectively, all our settlements seem to just be some ruins. Well, we could use this to our advantage a little bit at least. For starters, I discovered you can build your towers before the battle starts, which means you don't have to wait for them to build before they start shooting, so that's better than our last performance. Aside from that though, we are going to struggle because we have only just run at them units. They can just run at us up these channels, and while the channels will help us out because we're outnumbered, not an enormous amount. Also, the enemy have ranged units, something we don't even have access to, so this new paradigm of warfare is going to be damaging us quite a bit. In particular, these ice arrows were quite good. It not only does some damage, but it slows you down, so it's hard for us to run at those exposed archers and stop them from shooting. At least we got this hero trapped in a bunch of our bloodletters, and that hero was actually killed in that fight. So yes, just a few brawls here and there as our half-dead units grind the enemy down, but we're not exactly being destroyed. We are taking down enemy units, and that's what we need to do here. Well, in theory at least. If we can kill off a few enemy units, that will delay the enemy's next wave of invasion, but because we have no follow-up attacks, it doesn't really matter in the short term. So this is a roughly pointless battle, and it's not going particularly well. One important thing to note though is that during this battle I got mad at how bad it looked. I was like, I'm sure it looks better than this in old games, we can have better performance characteristics. And indeed, here's a better looking version of the same battle. It's actually not the battles, but the campaign map that is ruining performance in this game. Usually it's the other way around. But for me, the battles seem to run smooth at the higher settings, but we'll see a bit later, the frame rate on the campaign map is going to be going away. I also activated improved lighting or something like that, and it makes the sky light up, and it actually affects the lighting on the ground as well. It's all very nice. I think some of our units get shadows sometimes, at least not here by the looks of things, but sometimes shadows will render now as well. Here's our final guy, our commander, hacking away amongst the bears with Catherine the Great looking on. Basically, it didn't go very well. We did take out a couple of enemy units, that doesn't really matter as I said, although killing that hero might be important because it will take them a long time to level up the hero again, assuming they were a high level. So that could be a long-term blow. Not sure if that raid overall was worth it. At the same time, we're being raided by Kislev. They actually had an army in my home province, and here it is taking out a not particularly well-defended settlement. Considered actually trying to fight this one and kill a couple of units, but then thought, well, I probably won't, and just moved on. We actually got an okay auto-resolve there and damaged the units quite heavily. So we need to deal with that. Our two main armies are hanging around, but not quite near enough to stop them, so we'll start moving west with those guys. Fortunately, Kislev were making this attack very poorly overall. For starters, they didn't take that settlement they just won a battle at, they just sacked it, which doesn't mean anything. We can just cheaply repair it and now we're fine. And their army got distracted chasing a group of a couple of units I had nearby, not attacking any more settlements. And then the Rift to Chaos opened up, and I started thinking, can I bring down this Kislev invasion without my main force, so we can go to the Chaos Realm instead? Deadax Monolith here is half dead because I auto-resolved something earlier, I expect. Another wave is coming in, but it's just archers, a very weak wave. That first army there is more dangerous, but it is half dead from battles and attrition, and it's aggroed onto this small group of units. So what I decided to try was just go and stand slightly out of their movement range and see if we can get them to waste their turn. In particular, we want them to not attack or take Deadax's Monolith, which they easily could. That would be a long-term gain for the enemy. In the meantime, thinking it's probably going to be alright, I decided to send the main force off to get this Chaos Realm stuff going. This time we're going to Nurgle's land, we'll see that in a bit. Now here's the next turn. Things went exactly as we needed them to. The archer army didn't attack, it went into forced march stance, so it's extra weak to this blow from our secondary force that comes in and just completely flattens them instantly. So that's one of the two armies down. As for the other army, they did chase my small stack and generally didn't do anything. Perfect. Here's our main force in Nurgle's realm. Here the gimmick is that you always take attrition, and you have to go and collect a couple of things on the map before you can do the final battle. The thing is, we have a stance that makes us immune to attrition and doesn't affect our movement, so we can completely bypass the challenging gimmick of this little realm and just walk to the 2 points and do the thing and then leave. It's actually going to be pretty easy. Back in the real world, we chase down that other Kislev army with all of our stuff and catch them. Kill them, losing a unit, but that doesn't matter at this stage, we can just get them back again instantly, and once again things are looking safe. There was some difficulty in the Nurgle realm from the armies that were standing around. You had to kill a couple of armies to get to the points, and we did take some serious casualties doing those auto-resolves. However, when you touch the points, all of your troops come back, so that doesn't really matter, and when we lost a unit, I'll just get it again because we can magically recruit while in our anti-attrition stance as well, so really, we just can't be killed by all of this. We can storm through this challenge. Although at home things continue to get worse, as Kislev just can't be stopped. An absolute spam invasion. Every time we kill an army, there's a couple more already invading us. So now we have to go back to the east with our secondary force to do something about all this. Here we are a bit later doing that. We arrive with 3 enemy armies besieging our castle. However, we can lightning strike a small one to immediately make things a bit better, although actually that auto-resolve wasn't very good for us. So we would have taken far fewer casualties if we did that manually, I expect, but of course I didn't want to. We can do the same thing here again, lightning striking the small army to make this easier. Although in this case lightning striking also cancels out our own reinforcements and means we take several units of losses. I didn't care so much about that because again I can get them back right away in this circumstance, so it doesn't matter too much. And what the enemy have left here will no longer be enough to take the castle, so this situation is safe for now. In Nurgle's realm we reached the final battle, just had to walk to another point and fight another guy. Yet another case where it says it's going to be moderately easy, looks like it was actually supposed to be harder. But clicking the win button allowed me to win, so I guess that's the same result as doing it the slow way, and it saves time. This time, the story event this triggers is of more gameplay relevance because the Dark Lord, who is building his strength in the background, is strong enough now to actually send armies against us. So I guess this is a bit of an endgame challenge now. As we approach getting the fourth and final thing, they're going to spam some armies at us from the dimensional rifts. They were already doing that, but those ones were kind of weak. Now they're going to be kind of strong and there'll be more of them. Maybe they'll even target me specifically since I have the most demon souls or whatever it is we're collecting. At least Skarbrand is now back on the front line, having teleported here from the Chaos Realm, so he can immediately help out with the Kislev situation. We team up with our secondary army, and again an auto-resolve here is being real mean to me, saying I'm going to lose all these units to kill this half army with my 2 armies. This time I finally thought, no, we're not going to tolerate this. I'm going to have to run at them manually, so here it is happening. In practice, we actually do worse than we could do, because my units, like on the right there for example, are really bunched up. The reason for that is that while we could completely envelop the enemy and attack from all sides, the battles are still too short. The eternal problem of Total War, virtually everything dies immediately in combat. So you don't have time to go around behind them because your holding units in the front will die before your stuff gets there, and it might be a bit more efficient to just try and spam it on the side and distract some of the enemy from doing casualties against your holding units. Well, I don't really know because it's quite hard to test and I don't want to. But essentially, there was an enormous blob all over the place. Most of our troops weren't fighting, very inefficient to not have ranged units because melee units have low DPS because of that blobbing. But we still annihilated them, and it was still way better than the auto-resolve. I think the auto-resolve was being kind to the enemy because that was their faction leader we were killing there. And after this, it's time to end the madness. We have to send our 2 stacks over to Kislev's territory and try to do something about this constant spam war, or this is just going to be the entire rest of the campaign. There was a bit of switcheroo going on, in that they're attacking me while I'm attacking them. That's fine though, this 1 stack isn't going to be able to get past the castle defences anymore. Meanwhile, our 2 stacks can take their castle defences down, because they are famously not very good. But this time, we have 2 stacks to defend it, and we'll just wait here until we've built up the garrison, maybe got some walls to spawn, and that's that. Shout out to my full stack 3rd army, which we catch a glimpse of here in this clip. We're not going to be seeing them again for a long time, so you might be wondering why I don't have that many troops at the front line. It's because we have a full stack doing something at the back that perhaps I'll mention later. The stack attacking Blackrock Castle, the invasion from Kislev, just dies off, so that's fine. But then Kislev pulls the classic siege reinforcements cancel thing again on me. Because I had Skarbrand's army inside that forbidden citadel, the army standing outside can be teamed up upon if somebody besieges the castle and then everything nearby can attack our guys outside. However, I was able to do a retreat to re-trigger the battle with 1 fewer enemy army in range by the looks of things. So we've got 1.5 armies coming in. We can actually win on an auto-resolve if we sacrifice everything. Decided not to do that, and instead we have something of a serious battle, the sort of battle I don't really mind fighting because it's decisive and a little bit challenging. We have a nice downhill charge, and we have this Chaos Cultist in this army. This guy can summon blood letters and this flying thing as well, the Blood Thirster. And they just run in and fight as freely sacrificable units that disappear after a while. And they join the line of other bloodletters charging down the hill into everything. Those guys have armor-piercing damage and will somewhat counteract the enemy's armor-piercing damage by not having armor, which makes them more effective usually in the balancing because armor-piercing damage is usually lower than normal damage, so it's kind of wasted against unarmored units. If that makes any sense, essentially this hacking match is vaguely to our advantage, and we also kill their commander really early on because that puny human gets absolutely annihilated by our gigantic demon thing, perhaps to be expected. That's going to ruin Kislev's morale, but that also doesn't really matter because Kislev kind of has infinite morale. We get this special magic attack, where if you kill enough people, you can throw a sword down from the sky to blow stuff up. That's a technology you can unlock. Very handy. As for the infinite morale thing I mentioned, you can see there's this blue aura all over the place. This is when Kislev units become unbreakable. I can't tell what actually causes it, but something is stopping them routing when they get damaged, meaning the fights go on for longer and we ultimately take more casualties to bring them down. The upside though is that they also take more casualties and are less likely to be able to flee the field and escape, so it's kind of bad for them. It's just annoying. Well, the blobs essentially won now. The balance bar's still not that good, but everything they have left is just running away or is basically dead already. Soon we get this result. We completely destroyed the first army and did decent damage to the second one. And as for the damage on our side, essentially nothing at all. No units lost, some units barely even taking damage. That Pyrrhic victory where we lost everything prediction was not very accurate. Now we need to fight back. We break out of the Forbidden Citadel and start bringing down first this small enemy army, where it actually gave me a really bad auto-resolve, killing off tons of loads of units for an army that would have been defeated without taking any casualties effectively if I did it manually. That's a case where even I thought, oh, maybe I should have done that manually actually, because even though it wastes time, in a situation like this where you're surrounded by enemies, actually spending the time to not take casualties can matter, although in this case it doesn't as it turns out, but this was a risk to take to save myself real life time. I team up and fight one more of the enemy armies in the region, this time actually losing some units as well. I didn't mind that though, because I fully intended to just sit still next to the settlement and let it build up, and while we're sitting there we can get units back and change our army setup. It's a nice convenient time to do that anyway. Now, that third army I mentioned earlier, the reason they were going to the top left of my territory was to fight this thing that we can't see. The Demon Prince, the villain of the story, has summoned this powerful army, and it was in our back lines. It's actually already razed several settlements, although I think it was the same settlement over and over again because I kept rebuilding it. So an army was rampaging about in our back lines. I haven't mentioned it so far, but it eventually commits to this attack against a walled settlement where we'll have towers to help us defend. So we're going to do the strategy. You open the gates, run outside, you have to leave something on the wall so the towers will keep shooting, the goal being to just keep the enemy in front of the towers for as long as possible. They've got quite a few of these soul grinder things, the guys I liked the look of. I think they're coming from the Forge of Souls, which is where the Demon Prince lives, or something like that. So there's a lore reason we're fighting those spider guys, not that that particularly matters. We're going to suffer in this and any wall defense from the fact that we're not allowed to have ranged units, because normally you want to put ranged units on the wall to both activate the towers and shoot. Instead, we have to waste melee units standing on the wall to activate the towers, meaning they won't be doing very much damage. Also, these units being put in front of siege towers will be wasted as well, because much to my constant annoyance, you can't stop siege towers with melee attacks, they just clip through everything. So you just have to let them take the walls, and in that case having melee units up there on the walls actually is useful, so that's something. Here's a good look at these soul grinders, absolutely annihilating everything I sent out to stop them. That's what we like to see. Well, our guys are doing their job, because just getting the enemy to stand here will mean they gradually take chips of damage from the towers upstairs firing at them. And it's a garrison, so their lives don't matter. Plus, it's Warhammer, where most big attacks are less powerful than they look, so while it looks like they're completely flattening us, we're just losing a bit of health, tanking it on the armor and getting back up. Although their real utility comes after the units are basically dead. We get to this phase, when a few of them are still alive, they're routing off the field, and this is great because the enemy bother to chase them essentially, meaning they spend even more time in front of the towers, and they're not even attacking the gate as well. So we're gradually doing something, not very much because it's not the best towers and these units are strong, but collectively, we've done a lot of damage there, so to sacrifice like 2 Warriors of Chaos units to kill 2 health bars worth of Soul Grinder, that's a good trade. And we also actually won the siege defense in the east, taking out all of the enemy's infantry, freeing up those units to come and plug the various other advances elsewhere. I still thought we were going to lose this one, but the towers do their work outside and start thinning the enemy out, and perhaps more importantly, their commander flies inside and ends up fighting with some of our flyers just next to one of our towers, and that tower gradually kills their commander. I'm guessing that commander's quite a weak one, a magic-based commander. We take it out, their UFO thing falls away, and then the balance bar just immediately swings to be fully in our favour, because everything goes into the banished mode where they're just going to disappear over time. So we'll just win automatically after a bit, and we do. This was surprising, and to some extent disappointing, simply because I'd sent that third army up here for a showdown with that enemy army. Now they're almost here, and there's not going to be that showdown. And this army, this third stack of mine, costs something like 5,000 money per turn to upkeep. So we've already spent like 30 grand coming over to do this, and now we're not even going to do it, and the army's up here now. It's so far away from anything, it would almost be worth just firing it and re-recruiting it at the front line. Well, in the end, it's essentially going to be walking back to the front line, so one day I'll have a third stack. For now, our 2 stacks will have to do the business. We're trying to clear up the Kislev situation outside the Forbidden Fortress or Forbidden Citadel, and it's giving me this really annoying auto-resolve. I can't kill this group of 5 or 6 units with my stack without losing 4 units. So we go in, we do it the hard way and completely flatten them. That's that. And obviously I'm using Lightning Strike here to not fight everything at once. Then we do the same thing again to the other smaller group here at the back. And once again, we can't just kill them, we're going to have to go in for the manual resolve. It's a tricky thing to design, I suppose, and in terms of game design, you don't necessarily want the player to skip every battle, well maybe you don't anyway, but the battles themselves do break up the pace of the campaign because it's such a separate part of the game, and because often it doesn't matter, like in this case here. The battle itself was trivially easy. It would have been nice if it just allowed me to skip it and save 7 minutes or something it took to actually do that. Well, we do it, we lose basically nothing, the auto-resolve is shamed once again, and the remaining enemy army just retreated when I tried to sally out with Skarbrand. The annoying thing is Skarbrand is under siege, so he's not been replenishing. That means we need to sit around a little bit to get back to full strength. The enemy army disappeared, but we'll actually see them again in a second. In the meantime, the secondary army walks off to the west. I actually had a quest to take this place up here, and I might as well, because it's Kislev's only territory to our west, so this means we can only look to the east after bringing this place down, and we've got the skulls ready to take it over right away. We've got tons of skulls right now, in fact we need to take some more stuff if we can. Now my big plan was to set up an ambush on the road just to the east of the Forbidden Citadel. However, it turns out that was the enemy's big plan as well. That's where that army we didn't fight disappeared to. It was just hiding outside, and we actually fall for their ambush. But then I thought, wait a minute, the auto-resolve says I'm not going to lose any units, so I quickly put down a save for an experiment. Is the auto-resolve unit deletion prediction thing allowing us to see what the outcome of an ambush will be? The answer is no, we actually do lose a unit. However, I was fine with that result, so we are going to skip the ambush, because I'm just going to sit in the town anyway and wait for the second army to come back. I can immediately re-recruit the unit I lost. And then once our 2 armies are together, we'll focus on going to the east and to the south really, to the next enemy settlement we need to take. Here it is then, our 3rd army, our big spender, is up here killing the remains of the guys I sent to kill. Well, that was that, i.e. that was nothing. Just pointing out that that's why we're weaker than we're supposed to be. We're wasting time up here. It's a handicap, well perhaps a useful handicap, because we're doing okay on the front line without that other army. Now there's going to be another battle because the Kislevites attacked me in a place that's hard to sort of tell what's going on because we don't see their turns. I've got it on fast forward mode. Essentially, my 2 armies were standing just to the east of our town, the Forbidden Citadel, and they come at us with 2 of their good armies by the looks of things. We actually are predicted to win, but losing all units, so let's not have that. It's time for a major decisive battle, a classic Total War thing, the sort of thing we haven't really had so far in this campaign, a just massive field battle between the 2 factions. Although it is not actually going to quite be that. Well, my initial strategy was to hide behind this slight hill to see if I could get the enemy's artillery to not be able to hit me. That was not the case, but that doesn't matter so much. Here's the real tactical center of the battle. The enemy's 2nd army is coming onto the field at the exact same place as my army. That's another Total War classic thing, a sort of weird, glitchy sort of thing to happen. Well, here we are then. So the secondary armies are just going to be forced into melee combat with each other and be completely interlocked because they're spawning on top of each other. Sometimes in Total War, the reinforcements just won't spawn if the area they're spawning into is blocked by something. Looks like in this game in particular, it just spawns in among them and general chaos ensues. So some stuff's happening back there, and then there'll be this more normal looking field battle. I had been waiting, by the way, for my secondary army to come and reinforce this part of the battle. Seeing that wasn't going to happen, I thought let's just run at them. It's going to be 2 completely separate engagements, and in both, The only real tactic we need to do is to get our commander to shuffle through the mess and fight with the enemy's commanders to take them down. We actually have the advantage in this field battle part, because our bloodletters are again sort of strong balancing wise against their Tsar's guards, because we don't have armor, forcing the Tsar guards to waste their armor piercing abilities. But that's not the same going the other way. We also have armor piercing abilities against their armor. And their ranged units and stuff at the back are just going to get overwhelmed by my run at them strategy and probably won't get most of their damage off. Meanwhile, here's a look at what actually causes that slow motion I talked about earlier. It's caused by targeting spells, so that's the answer. When you target spells in the battle, it does actually go into slow motion, and that slow motion translates through into the battle replay. As for the fight happening here, well, we're obviously not doing anything, we're just standing here, everything's spawning in amongst us, and that's really to our advantage because all of their light cav are going to go down instantly, any ranged units will die easily as well, so broadly we have the advantage. Towards the end though, this happened, and this was the best thing that's happened in this campaign, so far at least. An absolutely massive bear stomps onto the field and crushes a load of my troops. What I was hoping here, in a sort of strange way, was that it would crush all of my troops, and this would actually be really effective, because our big blob should be weak against being trampled by not one but 4 gigantic ice bears. Turns out it's the classic Total War thing again of the gigantic units being a lot weaker than they look or they might be physically based on their size. They actually barely ever attack you, so it doesn't do very much, and because they have a huge perimeter, they're really easy to attack. That is, like, lots of our models will be in contact with them at their base all the time, so they'll constantly be taking damage from tons of the small infantry attacks, and that's going to wear them down over time, and Skarbrand with his big damage can fight them as well. So while I was hoping for a massive skulls for the skull throne moment where it just killed all of our troops in this horrendous blob, these bears actually did barely any damage whatsoever, and that was somewhat disappointing. A shame, at least it looked really good. It was the best thing I've seen in the campaign, I'll say then. Well, we come away from the battle with minimal casualties. We lost 1 unit, an artillery bike thing that just ran off into the enemy somewhere. But generally, it went really well. I expected to take far more losses in both battles, and we didn't. Plus, it was in the end turn sequence, so we'll get replenishment immediately. Essentially, we won that for free and crushed 2 powerful enemy armies. Now we're going to follow up, and this is sort of setting the pattern for how this is going to go. Kislev can attack us, but one-on-one, our armies are better than theirs, so the fact that we're both limited to 20 units means we will have the advantage. It seems our guys are just better, or at least running at the enemy with all melee units is good enough. It stops them using their ranged power and stuff. So we have some kind of tactical advantage, even without doing any tactics. And boom, we move on to take the next settlement down. That's a nice choke point for us. We also took 2 more settlements in the end turn due to the raised territories turning onto our side over time mechanic thing. So we now have 4 territories in Kislev's area. They have this massive zone to our south that's going to be their main area. I was desperately clicking on the settlement here because what I really wanted was to bring up that diplomacy menu and just peace out of the war, because I don't even nearly care about fighting them. But I don't think we have a choice. We are locked in an endless spam war. The only way to win is to actually go down there and kill them, but actually doing that is just as bad as fighting the spam war in terms of gameplay enjoyment. At this stage, we're just waiting for the campaign to end effectively. We need the turns to carry on so that another rift to the Chaos Realm will open, then we can go and do the 4th thing. In the meantime, I don't think it matters very much anymore what we do on the campaign map, and I didn't really want to do anything. Kislev come at us, luckily only with 1 stack, and our defensive choke point here is enough to bring them down for no effort, but they're going to have plenty more than that on the way. I took Winter Pyre to the east along the coast just because it was a quest to do it and because it's another Kislev pocket that is snuffed out. However, it's part of the next province over to the east, which is owned by the Dwarves, and you can actually see at the top there, the Dwarves were right next to Winter's Pyre with 2 armies. We've effectively opened a new front, we're at war with them and we can't get peace with them, so really I'm complicating matters by expanding here. We've now just got a longer border. I actually went to the north and tried to fight those Dwarf armies which landed nearby. I took down the smaller of the 2 with a lightning strike, but the auto-resolve was really bad in terms of casualties. We lost tons of stuff, and then I messed up the reinforce. I wanted to double attack this extra army. I didn't do it. Then I retreated and didn't do this battle because there's no point. And then I essentially just let them go because the rifts opened up and I was able to get into the rift on the very first turn it appeared. So we're just going to go straight for the story objective. This time we're in the Sinch realm. This one seems to be the most involved of the realm challenges. There are all these islands with various teleport pads between them, and you don't know which ones go to which. Your goal is just to get to a certain place in the network. And you can uncover which teleport zones go to which other ones by fighting battles or standing on the white areas on the map. So here we are, killing a random stack. Too annoyed to do the battle, so I'm just going to have to lose this unit. Again, I can just get them back instantly, so it doesn't matter here. And then as an option after the battle, you can reveal a teleport sigil. So it reveals a blue one nearby, and that tells us that if we step into another one with that blue thing over it, it goes to there. However, all this proved to be not that important for a simple reason. We actually get kicked out of the Chaos Realm before we do very much. And the reason for that is somebody else was in there at the same time as me, also on the first turn the gates opened, and they got it. So I guess that was pure RNG, because maybe their character spawned right next to the teleport that happened to go to the end of that challenge, and they just did it immediately. That must be what happened anyway, because we didn't get to do anything, we just got kicked out. And now, the demon soul we need to get isn't there until the next round of gate openings. That means we're going to have to wait roughly 30 turns to get the chance to do that again. I was so annoyed by this because it seems like it was just bad luck, but I was ready to finish it right now. I was excited that the thing finally spawned. I think it's roughly every 30 turns they show up. So we're just going to have to hold out against the spam wars and maybe try to advance to at least have some chance of cutting them off, but really at this stage, advancing will only make things worse for us. There's even the possibility that it will happen again the next time we go in. Well, I think we have no choice now, so I essentially commit to a grind war to the south against Kislev, and a smaller, easier one to the east against the dwarves, who also started constantly recruiting armies and throwing them at me. Here we are taking down Kislev's main force, I guess, with a sneaky ambush at our choke point. That went quite well, actually. Skipping the first of what looks like it was 5 stacks currently coming at us on that particular front. I wanted to be as aggressive as possible to perhaps snuff out some of the advancing Kislev armies, but I had to go back pretty fast because there's one of these freely spawning demon prince armies behind us that's going to cause havoc. On the way back though, a massive ambush. I did not expect Kislev to be behind us from that position at all. Not sure how they even got back there, but we're being properly ambushed, and this time I decided to fight it manually and actually see what happened. One thing you can do in the manual fight is pause the battle right as it starts and give everybody an order, so this gives you AI-like reaction speed. So everybody starts running at each other all over the place, and well, it's just going to be an enormous brawl where a lot of the time neither side has particularly good matchups against each other. But we're just going to hope that our melee-focused army will be good in melee. But check this out at the top. This was the big development here. They've actually put in some kind of ambush debuff, although it only lasts for 1 minute and it goes away gradually over that minute. So it's about the least they could do. One of the big things that Total War doesn't have is a disadvantage for being ambushed. What I want to see is a huge morale disadvantage, because that's the main thing. Normally in an ambush, the ambush side in many cases doesn't fight at all because they're just completely unprepared and are terrified. Usually that's not the case in Total War, but here we do get that melee debuff, so we fight a bit worse for a bit. And then we just wait until a couple of minutes later to see what happens, essentially. It looks like our side eventually won the brawls, which again could be to be expected just because we have a melee-focused army, and all of their cav and archers weren't going to be up to much in those brawls. So that was that. We did lose the unit in the end, but we totally stomped an army. I was just surprised it was there at all. And I was pleasantly surprised that they have done something to make the ambushes have some kind of stat change on the battlefield. That army I wanted to go after, the freely spawning Demon Prince army, does annoyingly make this attack right here. I thought I might be able to stop them using the towers and such. Well, turned out I couldn't. I actually played this battle quite poorly because I couldn't tell which route through the town the enemy were going to use. Because some of the routes are above other ones, it confused things on the map a bit. Well, we ended up losing that settlement. Skarbrand goes out with a backup stack to take down one of the nearby dwarven towns on our eastern border, going to spawn one of the blood things to go after the next one down to the east, which is their capital. on the way, it gets attacked by the Challenge Stone Pact, one of the other randomly spawning army systems, the Rogue armies. In this case, I think I retreated and didn't fight them, but I'm just mentioning this because the Challenge Stone Pact became my nemesis in this part of the campaign for reasons we'll soon see. Looks like we've got some easier battles going on elsewhere. We have those rebel battles constantly, but we always win, so I just don't mention them here. Now here's a big attack that happened on our choke point against Kislev. They came in with 3 or 4 stacks. I think it might actually be 4 here, although 3 are visible at the moment. I used a lightning strike to kill the first one, sacrificing half of my army to kill one of theirs essentially. But the other 2 stacks then came in to attack in the same turn. This time we're going to need to do the settlement defense. I sallied out of one of these settlement entrances because there was a group that was mostly ranged units, and I thought let's just go out and kill them before the battle starts. And that's going to work out. Meanwhile, everyone's just going to stand inside the town and try to be near towers. Effectively, we don't have any strategies we can use because we have no ranged units. We just have to stand in lines, let the enemy fight us, and see who dies first. With the towers, of course, giving us an edge. Although the enemy do have another parade of enormous bears to commit to these melees, it looks like they can just sort of push through and get the business done here. So the balance bar's not looking very good, and there's not too much we can do about that. We do kill the first army pretty effectively. Here I am finishing off their commander. The 2 sides just ground each other down, and we probably have slightly higher morale or something for being in a town. What really helped was the leader of the second army, Catherine the Great, ran into the middle of the settlement on her own and was killed quite quickly. So that's probably going to remove a ton of the enemy's magic and give them a morale debuff and stuff. And the balance bar's starting to look a bit better now. The towers will be gradually hammering the enemy over the course of the battle. And everything that could rout eventually routed, meaning the battle was just against the bears, and as it turned out, sending everything into melee against the bears was eventually enough to bring them down, and we do win this fight. So the enemy are held off. We lost absolutely tons of stuff, but we're just going to sit here re-recruiting it and defending this area for now, so that's alright. Kislev lost more, they can probably re-recruit it again instantly, so that was just another brief engagement in the spam war that won't matter very much. Now what happened next was the exact same thing happened again because some other 4th army appears to attack. This time things went a little bit easier just because it's only 1 stack. They're attacking from fewer directions so we can focus more on the towers and just put our entire remaining blobs into the blob and brawl. Plus with the enemy blobbed up, this sword magic attack was particularly devastating right there, just clearing out one of the enemy's attack directions. And ultimately they also routed and mostly died. We're now very dead ourselves, but that's the end of the fighting and our replenishment is quite strong. There was another random but large battle somewhere right at the back of the map as another free spawning Demon Prince army is attacking some walled settlement. I would be quite happy if this didn't happen. I think the whole big army spawning in your backlines thing all the time is pretty annoying. The rogue army system from the old Warhammer games was relatively annoying. This is on top of that another annoying thing that happens. Well, in that case we won the battle because the enemy just all suddenly got banished when their morale went away and we won miraculously. Here we are taking out the other Demon Prince army that was near our front lines. I had to use an army to do that, and that's why our defenses aren't all that good right now, but we'll rush back ready to reinforce there. We're going to unfortunately take our first major blow from the Challenge Stone Pact because their little army besieges one of my backup stacks that I had put in this new town to replenish. This means they took attrition instead of replenishment and they're basically dead and we can't fight our way out, so that is a shame. What I have done though is move Scarbrand over to our line against Kislev. I'm going to do a 3-stack push down into Kislev from here, trying to see off all of their attacks and make it through to take out the buildings, generating those units. I spammed a bunch of my own units to go and bring down the Challenge Stone Pact, although after the damage was done over in that region. Not that any of this area matters at all, so I'm not really going to talk about it. Here we are, attacking Kislev's first town that we made it to with a 3-stack rush. That's easy enough. The thing is, after this town, the terrain doesn't make doing a 3-stack rush very suitable, because it opens up. There are going to be enemy settlements in all directions and enemy armies in all directions. There are more rogue forces here. There are even humans from further south. The Human Empire are up here on this front line. This means we'll have to divide our attention a bit, or at the very least, leave places undefended as we move on with our forces, which is what I did at first. I moved to the south with all 3 armies to attack the next nearest settlement. There I am taking out a damaged Kislev army. I thought I'll just stack up here, leave the settlement under siege and have a turn of replenishment, and then attack the settlement. However, the Challenge Stone Pact are back for whatever reason. This time they've got a bigger army, and it actually comes in to attack me while I'm doing the siege, and the Kislev armies nearby will support. We actually still have the advantage even with all that. However, I had to do this gigantic battle, and I was so ready to skip this. I was just annoyed I was having to actually play the game. It's got to that point in the game. And of course we can't have a decisive field battle without some weird reinforcements to deal with. So the enemy are coming onto the field behind our deployment zone. I'm going to be setting up my second army facing that direction then, while the first army deals with the enemy's first army. So 2 separate fights once again. As for this first fight, I don't think we've got the best matchup here, because the ogres we're facing, I guess, are all large type units in that they don't receive the bonus against infantry that all of our mainline stuff has. We need bonus against large units, which we tend not to have in that army. So that's just going to be a massive brawl where it's not all that good for us. And here's another massive brawl. This one will be better. We'll get all of our bonuses in play against Kislev. Anti-armor and anti-infantry units are our specialty, and they've got tons of infantry and armor for us to kill. Unfortunately, I didn't catch them right on the edge of the map. That would have been better, because by leaving a bit of space, they have some room to set up their ranged units and actually use them. We wanted to be right on top of them, so all of the ranged units were in melee immediately and couldn't get any of their ranged DPS off. So a suboptimal mess back there. The first mess, well, it's not going that well. Because I was microing the stuff on the edge of the map so hard, I didn't really look at this battle while playing, and I actually lost a fairly useful commander. He was level 18, I think, so not quite leveled up enough to be immortal. We've lost a whole bunch of experience, essentially, whereas losing all of the actual units, that doesn't matter because you can just get them back right away. And we are going to be losing some of those units because we're not facing particularly good fights. There's a bit of bad micro with 4 units who chased something routing off the field, not participating in the fight. I was focusing on this mess, trying to keep everything engaged and make sure their ranged units weren't shooting. We did a decent job taking down the first wave of Kislev troops, then the second wave comes in. They've got 2 armies coming in here, and latter parts of the armies come in later as well. So more stuff spawning into the fight. We're still not quite there at the line, although a bit closer. There's just enough room for their ranged units to fire. But we can quickly push something forwards like Scarbrand and stop them from doing that. It's a classic case where once something's in melee, the entire unit will be in melee, so that stops them firing their bows. I quite appreciate it here how the fact that selecting abilities in battle makes these slow sections appear in the replay is kind of cool, because you randomly get to watch parts in slow motion, and it's interesting to see if it happens to pick any dramatic things that you're looking at. Some RNG special effects. Well, here's the reason it's slowed down. We're going to sword attack this blob of infantry, hitting my own troops as well, but who cares about that, especially when you're playing as a cornered faction. Doesn't kill them very much, but we're nearly there. The fact we're fighting Kislev means this takes longer than usual, because they're doing that thing where all the units become unbreakable, so they would be gone by now, but we have to fight them mostly down to the last man. Meanwhile, against the ogres, we've got this now. We're just taking enormous casualties, killing everything the hard way. Turns out we just about have the numbers amongst our stuff to bring them down. Bringing us to this Pyrrhic victory. We took out most stuff on the enemy side, lost a fair few units on our side, but with the defeat of the nearby garrison in that battle, we can instantly take over and occupy the region and start rebuilding effectively. Our next move though will be annoying because, as mentioned earlier, we're in this open space. There are just enemies and enemy settlements in all directions. This complicates matters. What we're going to do now is move things along relatively fast in this video, because we go into a segment now where I spent about an hour just sometimes moving forward, sometimes moving backwards, generally going about on this one screen, trying to kill everything as it was walking behind us, and sometimes trying to advance and take new settlements. There's an example of us using one of the Blood Horde things to colonize a settlement, thus avoiding the penalty of losing troops for colonizing somewhere, or real troops that is. So we just skipped about 12 turns in that last cut. Here we are at the lower end of that section where Kislev begins to border with the human empire. Killing off another Kislev empire, you can see the general strategy, just run at them with loads of stuff. This skips any hassle, the stuff will just come back immediately because the casualties are nice and evenly distributed. That's what we like to see. So we're down here in the empire now. Obviously that doesn't really help, because we're also constantly at war with them, so it's just the same deal down here, but with different units. Maybe a more interesting battle could come along. Kislev still have plenty of territory over in their east, but I also had this disposable army sneaking about and destroying unguarded towns, and then creating the blood stack things to back up this process. So here I am doing just that. They do have their main force in the area, but we're just ignoring it. We're playing this as annoyingly as possible, which often is the best thing to do. Our front line to the north is completely undefended, but they might not notice. That's vaguely the plan. And hopefully all of this economic damage we're causing will slow things down. It's not going to be 5-stack spams all the time. It seems to have got down to about a 2 or 3 stack potential for Kislev at this stage, so that's all good. And also that same group went into ambush nearby the town and took out their main force here, which was half dead from attrition by the looks of things. Pretty nice, but it's not going to be the last we see of this particular army and that leader, as we'll see in a moment. The main thing that's happening right now is that the rifts are open, so it's time to once again make our shot to win the campaign in some way, or at least advance the plot. We're back in the Siege realm, just fighting stuff and trying to reveal the sigils to work out how to get to the middle. It might be possible to get there right away by sheer luck, or maybe not. We need to find a red sigiled teleport. Well, my luck was pretty poor. I started just kind of walking around, sometimes getting the symbols. It didn't go especially well. At least on the outside, things are going quite well. I've rampaged down into the Empire now. They didn't really make any concerted effort to stop us. I think they're busy fighting other people. In particular, they're at war with my ally, the Ogre Kingdoms, from the southwest corner of the map. That's probably helping. We're just going to rampage around in here and generally cause some disruption as well, just like in Kislev, with relatively disposable armies. If they get in too deep and die, fine, I'll just make them again. We have an appearance from the main dwarf faction, I think this is. Somebody made a long crusade across the map into eastern Kislev and then instantly died. Well, that was a celebrity appearance from the dwarves, we don't see too many of them. Here's an unwanted appearance. It's the Challenge Stone Pact, back at it again. They're actually attacking one of the places I'd left undefended earlier. I happened to be walking back there because I wanted to go east from that location. I had to recruit more units to actually bring down this packed army, even with a settlement garrison getting involved. For some reason, the ogres do really well in auto-resolve, it seems. Well, we brought them down, but we basically died in the process. Normally not a problem, but the very same turn, a Kislev army appeared from somewhere around here and besieges us inside the town as a decent army as well. So we're going to be losing that army and that town. Finally, our rampage through eastern Kislev is over, but maybe the damage is done, and maybe it doesn't matter at all, because the real business will be happening not in this real world, in a different realm. At least our rampage into the Empire is going pretty well. We rampaged all the way down to Beschaffen here, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll just stop, because again, we're surrounded by enemies. We've gone way deep into the enemy's territory. We could actually go back and attack Kislev's capital, which is now to our north. That could be fun. Well, I don't really know. Doesn't matter too much, I expect. Here's the decisive battle, or the beginnings of the decisive battle. The Kislev main force, the one we killed 6 turns ago, is back, and in fact they're in the Chaos Realm. With us, they certainly came back quickly. We need to take them down because they might complete the challenge before we do if we're unlucky. However, I didn't want to. This was at the end of a 2-hour session of constantly thinking I was about to end the campaign. I was so ready to just skip through and get out of here. But no, when I auto-resolved the Kislev force, the teleport they were standing on brought me to 2 more fights that I couldn't auto-resolve. That meant I essentially had to go back and fight the Kislev fight properly and not take any losses. Plus, I thought this would be a sort of decisive moment to clash with our main rival in the Chaos Realm towards the end of the game. This is something in a plot sense. And what a beautiful purple day for a battle it is, another fantastic looking map. As for the map's actual features though, there was a big tower right in the middle that blocks progress. And that interrupts the usual run-at-them strategy because I had to divide into groups to run around these various towers actually. Pretty good. Lack of battlefield features has been a long-term criticism of mine of this series. I like to see a battlefield where you have to do stuff because of what the map is like. I think they should all be like this, essentially, in one way or another. We actually got a pretty good run at the engagement anyway, because I got my halberds into their sleds, then tried to bring the halberds out and swap them for our regular troops, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Another long-term Total War thing. Well, elsewhere, the fights are just going to pop off all over the place. No particular strategy, because I was just trying to get past these choke points as fast as I could, so the units are just all over the place now. But so are theirs. We're just going to stand here getting run over by the sleds and probably damaging them back at the same time. And essentially that's that. A messy, minimal tactics engagement is what our army is perfectly suited for, being just mostly melee units that are great in close combat and bad at everything else. So the enemy has a couple of those that die, and then everything else is at a disadvantage. Plus our commander is better than theirs. There's another slow moment. So we can use Skarbrand to take down their commander. Might even be their faction leader, I think, that guy, since you can only bring faction leaders into the Chaos Realm by the rules of the game, for whatever reason. So we're going to take him out, and the rest of his army is going to gradually die, and yes, we stomped them with actually minimal damage. It was all fine. And here's the happy ending. I got to auto-resolve the next, much less important fight. There was supposed to be a third fight in the old timeline. This time it doesn't happen, perhaps because I came away from the second fight strong enough to scare the AI off. There was another battle back in the real world. The vampires are actually coming at me, so a brief appearance of the vampires in this campaign. I had set up an ambush to stop them because I suspected they were about to attack me. It doesn't work, and we lose most of our stuff here trying to bring them down with the auto-resolve. But I strongly suspected that none of this mattered at all. And in retrospect, yes, none of that mattered at all, including this, but I'm going to show it anyway. There was another big battle against the Kislevs of the main force. It was another case using hidden troops, where we sort of drew the enemy into a fight that they would automatically lose because they didn't know what the balance bar would look like in advance. Something, something, something. We killed them and then stormed forward to take Kislev itself, so not a complete victory over them, but a symbolic victory over our long-term rivals. We have their capital. That will deny them a bunch of money, at the very least, and we can sit here and gloat. The good news is that Skarbrand eventually does get to the middle, almost using the entire time limit of this challenge. We had just about the worst possible route through the Chaos Realm. I think we had terrible luck. We eventually get there before anyone else. I skipped the quest battle again. I originally was going to do it to see what these things actually were, but it took me so long to get here that I didn't want to by the time I got here. I think that was a wrong move, because I strongly suspect those quest battles are actually good, and we'll see why I think that in a minute. It then plays a cutscene where the boss, the guy who's trying to become a new Chaos God or something, is absorbing the power of a dying bear god. That's the plot, essentially. And now he's done that, so he's going to become a nuisance, a very powerful Chaos Demon, and maybe a Chaos God or something. Our job is to impress our daddy Khorne by going and killing him. And now that we've collected the 4 things, we're going to be able to go to where that guy is. He's in a different part of the Chaos Realm that we weren't allowed to go to before. Now it pops up saying we have 40 turns to do this, and if we do, we'll win the campaign. I was very worried by this. I thought, oh, you've got 40 turns. That means it's something really involved that you have to do to finish this last stage. Fortunately, that is not going to be the case. While waiting to get Skarbrand's troops back, we also capture Prague, another of the major Kislev settlements. We even get the achievement for reuniting historic Kislev or something like that. Normally it's a playing as Kislev thing, but looks like you don't have to play as Kislev to actually get it. Probably a glitch, but thanks for the free achievement. Special shout out to one of my Bloodspawn stack things that was going around in the vampires' territory, attacking the same 2 settlements. We attacked them both and sacked them because they were barely defended at all. Then with not much else to do, I came back to raise them as well. This was all completely pointless, but I just like the way that you can use these disposable stacks to do really annoying behind enemy lines things that at the very least will distract the enemy and stop them from attacking you. But as mentioned, I didn't really need to do that in this case. So let's get right to business. Eventually Skarbrand fully replenishes and I walk to the nearest rift. I can then teleport to the final section of the game. This is where I thought there was going to be some giant thing that needed that 40 turn time limit to get through. No, you just start right next to the quest, and that is the end of the game. So basically, after 1 turn of waiting, you just walk into it, and that's that. We enter the final quest battle. because we collected the 4 things, a magical bridge appears here that takes us to Bellacor's secret realm, the Forge of Souls, where he's making those half robot, half demon things we see now and again. We've got to go in there and kill him in what is easily the best part of this game. To start off, we just have to attack this small group of enemies. We're in this locked off portion of the map, so we just take out a few enemy units by running at them, and they're running at me as well, so that speeds things up a bit. We're actually at a disadvantage in that fight there against the Bloodletters, but it won't matter for reasons I'll explain later. In the meantime, Scarbrand is getting annoyed by these pink things throwing other pink things at him. He comes in for a massive boot, that's what we like to see. So we just have to grind those enemies down, and while that happens, it's time to play another game of why is the background better than the map. There are some seriously impressive backgrounds in the battles, and this is a particular case. There's the bridge we used to get in here, I guess. There's some sort of fire tornado in the sky, the sort of thing you totally don't see while playing because you're sort of top down while playing the game and quite zoomed out. You don't really look at the environment very much. And check this out, I totally didn't see this. A spinning, biting skull surrounded by flying skulls that also bite occasionally as well. I thought this was the best thing I'd seen in the game since that giant blue bear. Those were easily the top 2 visual moments of playing the game. Well, eventually we kill this group. Then comes the interesting part. We start doing this wave defense thing where we have to defend against tons of enemies spawning back where we started and running at us. However, we've got currency at the top there, we can put buildings down like those towers you might spot and even barricades, and you can even buy more units from this weird lava thing at the back. You can't really tell in the battle replay, but normally there's a menu there that lets you pull out more units. This is a lot more like a traditional RTS experience, and it's way better than the normal experience in my opinion. This is precisely the sort of thing we want to see, if only because it's something new and something on top of the usual fare. Being able to change your battle loadout and put buildings down brings the game to be more in line with other strategy games, and I think they should really lean heavily into that all the time. Well, what happens is we take down this wave of enemies, but it's actually infinitely respawning. The last couple of units are at least, so every time we defeat these dogs, they just come back and charge at us again. So we have to leave a few units here for the rest of the mission to just constantly fight with those guys. And I should note, by the way, that your units can also infinitely respawn. If they die and you have enough currency at the top, you can just buy your units back. We'll see that later. You can also do a bunch of other things that, well, we can't see in the replay. You can buy upgrades on units, you can heal units on top of just buying them again after they die, and you can teleport units off the field and put them in a reserve pool that will heal them as well and then teleport them back in later. There are all kinds of new game features that I had no idea were going to be here, suddenly encountered in the final mission. An extremely welcome surprise, and as I said, if they put this in the entire game, we would be talking all of a sudden. We would have a classic RTS experience with the Total War epicness, scale and graphics, and I would be in that market. Well, as you can see, what happens in the mission is we carry on towards the middle of the map, and we're ambushed by a whole bunch of those soul grinder mech demon units and a giant here by the looks of things, and we just have to hack them down. Here's a case to illustrate unit revival. Our hero here actually gets taken down against the soul grinders. That hero is immortal anyway, so that wouldn't have counted as a kill on the strategy map, but here it's even less so. He just teleports away effectively and can come back at one of the reinforcement points. Across the rest of the map, well, we're just taking a pounding and we'll eventually grind our way through these enemies. We are being helped out by the fact we have a couple of high-level towers shooting in at the same time. Although, the fight back towards the start is heating up because more and more stuff was spawning over here. I was having to answer that by recruiting more units from the thing that's here to add to our pile, and the infinite flow of dogs was turning into an infinite flow of some better stuff, some anti-infantry units like the demonettes as well. A little bit dangerous, but ultimately it doesn't matter, I guess. If we lose back there, we just have to win at the front. And it's going that way. We've just taken down 2 soul grinders and we'll run in to fight the ranged soul grinders, the sort of cannon artillery types who were sitting on the edge. I could have engaged them before if I wanted to be better, but we were stuck in one of the classic melee blobs where once your units are kind of blobbed around a single entity, they can't really move. And there's the guy who died, back at it again just later in the same battle fighting on the other battlefront. So there you go, you can rebuy units basically, and you can spend your resources to heal your existing units to stop them dying in the first place. So for that reason, while we're actually taking a pounding as we advance, we're barely losing anything because stuff keeps coming back in between these shots, effectively. Also looks like the enemy's low morale is getting to them. That guy just fades away before joining that fight. I think Skarbrand had beaten him up a bit already. And this guy back here is going to have a similar problem. This is a pretty cool fight between the Khorne Soul Grinder and this bike thing. I never really got what the bike thing was for. It kind of sucked as far as I can tell, but it looks pretty good. And speaking of looking good, here's a skull with a weird cog thing in its mouth, another replay-only thing that I noticed, as well as this thing on the ceiling. I guess that's the forge, the place we're supposed to be, where the soul grinders are being manufactured. All stuff that's sort of off camera when you're playing normally. Almost feels like a waste of money that must have gone into making that, but at least we got to see it now, and it looks pretty good. So in the final area, we have the final engagement, where the guy behind all this, Be'lakor, this Chaos Demon, is here, and we have to take him down, along with a bunch of other random units. He's effectively the final boss. Luckily, he's not that powerful. I thought maybe he was going to completely own us up, but not especially. The Soul Grinders are more of a worry, really, if only because there's more of them. But again, you can spend your currency to recruit new units, put up barricades, and build towers in this area. So we fort up and get ready for a long fight where the towers will give us a gradual advantage that only increases over time. And we get Skarbrand to focus on bringing down Be'lakor. We have a nice advantage because they're basically the same thing, these two guys, Chaos Demons, but our guy is level 50 and they're level 1, so we probably have some more number to use, plus Skarbrand has special quest weapons and regenerating health, all sorts of things. Meanwhile, the fight on the other side of the map, well, it's getting more and more bad for us because I'm not microing it at all. Our units seem to have been drawn out to where the enemy is spawning and we're just getting constantly wailed upon. All I was doing was occasionally moving the camera over there, clicking the heal button after selecting everything and then going away. So my units are just staying alive because I'm spending all my resources keeping them alive, but they're not doing all that well in the fight. At least we do take down Be'lakor. He proved easy enough to kill after he slaughtered a bunch of our troops. We could just resurrect them again. And that's that. I thought that might actually end the mission, but no, the objective to finish the campaign now is to take out all of his stuff back here. And there is quite a lot of stuff, tons of soul grinders and other units from all of the various chaos factions are just showing up and joining the fray. Those exalted bloodletters will have an advantage against us, same for those minotaurs, same for any of the soul grinders with anti-infantry capabilities, which is most of them, and same for any ranged units, of which there are a few. Essentially, we're weak against virtually everything we end up facing right here, but we have this currency being generated, so I can just buy more units and heal units constantly to spam our way through this. In game design terms, you're probably not supposed to lose this battle effectively once you get here, so it gives you plenty of resources to work with. It's nice to look at though in replay form. We're getting owned up by all sorts of different things. It's colourful, it's very lively, and I'm sure our guys are having a great time because our Khorne followers do like a bit of death, even if it is on their own side. I ran this extra unit to support all the way across the map to help out. Probably not going to make that much difference, but yes, as you can see, a massive mess, minimal tactics, can't really tell what's going on, but it's probably something bad, but then again it doesn't matter. I was able to buy one of my own soul grinders to even the odds, and it immediately gets to work on the enemy's monsters. This is the unit I wanted to make a lot of when I saw it earlier in the campaign, and you can recruit them normally as a standard unit, but the place I can do that is back at the start in our home province effectively, and it's hard to justify the cost of making this massive and expensive army and then paying tons while it walks across the map to get to your front lines and join the main armies, so I actually never ended up doing that, which is a shame. Well, it teams up with Skarbrand now at the very end to bring down all of the other soul grinders as well as our massed infantry, which might be doing something, probably just dying for the most part. But as mentioned, we can both bring them back, and it doesn't matter at all even if I don't, because this is the last mission, so everything can die as long as you don't lose, I suppose. Well, we don't lose. In fact, we win. That sounds even better. We've captured the Forge of Souls, we've taken down most of the stuff, and finally we know what these weird battle results we were seeing earlier were all about. It's because there are infinite spawns of stuff in these quest battles. I guess the other ones technically aren't quest battles because it lets you skip them, but maybe that's what we would have seen, and that would have been great. In retrospect, I found this mission the most fun part of the game, and the fact there were probably 4 other similar missions that I deliberately skipped thinking they would be too annoying seems to have been a mistake. Well anyway, with that done, we come to the end of the plot. We have defeated the guy. That guy was drawing his power from the dying bear god, so the Khorne specific ending, I guess, is that we took the skull of the bear god and gave it to Khorne. I think our guy Skarbrand was trying to earn redemption for something that I have since forgotten. But Khorne wasn't that impressed with the skull anyway. He just laughs at him and sends him back to the real world, and effectively nothing happens. That's the ending. Although there was a sort of prequel-esque thing going on here, where the narrator in the story is the old man in Warhammer 1 and 2 who pops up in the corner and gives you tutorial messages and then later turns out to be an agent of chaos. I think this is his origin story. That's what the fans were calling out for, probably. I'm not sure if this was supposed to be a prequel, but that's what I read into it anyway, so the other games happen after this. Here's a look at the end of campaign thing where you can watch yourself painting the map. About here is where I thought the game should have ended. When we'd got this top left-hand corner after about 100 turns, that was when I was sort of done. I think it would be better to have the game be about 10 hours long and stop about there, and then if you want to play it again, you play it as one of the other factions in a different part of the map. If you play optimally, you can end the game after about 120 turns. If you go into the Chaos Realm whenever you can and always succeed, that's the earliest the game can end, I think. So I suppose I just want that to be the normal way to end the game. We ended up doing all this other stuff down here and taking the bottom left portion of the map. This was ultimately not very useful because the objective of the game was just to win that quest battle, and you can only ever send one army into the Chaos Realm. So you actually only need enough territory to have one decent full stack to win the game, which is a shame. In retrospect, most of what we saw in this campaign, especially in the second half of this video, wasn't important at all. We could have done nothing to Kislev. We could have stayed in the Chaos Realm and also done what we did there because we had that Skarbrand army all along. So it feels like there's a kind of game design conflict here in that this story-based quest system doesn't fit with the strategy map portion because you don't need to play the strategy map portion to do the story missions beyond a certain point, and ending the game way back at that certain point I think would also be better and let you switch between factions and see more of the game before you're tired of playing the game, which is going to come earlier for me than new players because I've played Warhammer 1 and 2 and they are extremely similar to Warhammer 3. Another thing I was expecting to see but wasn't here was the full world map. I thought that was going to be the deal with Warhammer 3, the sort of exchange for making the same game 3 times, was that the last time it would be the biggest map and have everything on it. I think what's actually going on is they were going to do that, but they didn't finish it or something, so it's just not in the game, and it might be in the game later. Maybe that happened with Warhammer 2 actually, come to think of it. Well, I played the game and it wasn't here, so from a purely casual, not following the developers on Twitter perspective, that wasn't a feature in the game, and I'm disappointed by it in that sort of black box experimental way. Even though I'm sure it actually is going to show up at some point. I won't be playing the game by the time it showed up, and that was what I would rather do, play the Immortal Empire style campaign, than this style of campaign, because while it was a fun gimmick, in retrospect I think it actually wasn't very good, and the two aspects of the game are at odds. If you replayed the game you'd have to do the Chaos Realm stuff again, and I think it would be really annoying, especially the Cinch one. Although I might be able to now exploit my knowledge of how the game works to play the game a lot less. You effectively just want to set up a little corner empire somewhere and slap end turn so that you can send a stack off to go and do the missions, and try not to get into any drama on the campaign map. If you play as a faction that can actually do diplomacy, you might be able to just sit at peace in the corner and still win the campaign by just passing time. A confusing setup. Well, I suppose the takeaway is that the mission they did do for the final mission I thought was really good and should be the main battle system for this game. If you could put buildings on the map and recruit things, like the encounters, the battles were much rarer, but were a much bigger deal and were more strategic and RTS-ish, I think that would be better. Once again, we're just imagining a different game as I play a game, that's how it tends to go. But I suppose I had at least an okay time playing Warhammer 3. I enjoyed it a lot more in the first half than the second half. In the second half I was waiting for it to end, as you might be able to tell from this commentary. And when it did end, it then invalidated a lot of the effort I put in to get to that ending, because I should have just done nothing the whole time, just to let the turn timer go on so I could do the final mission and not fight for the bottom left-hand corner of the map, which was a bit of a drag. So that's that. Thanks for watching this commentary of the Khorne campaign in Warhammer 3. I would like to play Warhammer 3 again sometime. The thing I specifically wanted to do, inspired by my rival, is to play as Kislev and do a bears only challenge, just recruiting their various bear units, of which I noticed quite a few. But I'd rather do that on the full world map if they do end up releasing that and adding it to the game as a separate campaign. Hopefully it will be free. So maybe I'll come back one day and do that, maybe with some mods as well. So for now, goodbye to Warhammer for now. Looking forward to seeing if they'll use their fantasy team in the future to do some other stuff, perhaps build on Total War Troy and make a full mythology Total War. That would be easy enough. And of course the mythical Lord of the Rings Total War game that the world wants to see. In the past they actually did say they had thought about it, but the licensing to get the Lord of the Rings franchise was too expensive, so they didn't do it, and that led to them making Warhammer back in the day. Well, now they've got infinite money, because Warhammer was really successful, this franchise, they might think about that again and go back to it, and maybe we'll see the legendary game eventually materialize. Well, enough about that. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. The next massively summarized commentary I'll be doing will be on a sci-fi game, and I'll leave it at that for now. It will be coming at some point. With any luck, it will be a little bit faster than this campaign, but I'm not very lucky as things go, especially when it comes to making short videos, as it turns out. Well, I'll see you for whatever comes out of the Chaos Realm next.